Chapter 2791. One of them was stepped on by Ling Han, and the other was speechless. Ling Han was really going against the heavens. Of course, there was a limit to everything, and that was in the second level. Bastard! He Kun gritted his teeth, and his eyes were cold as if they were about to spit fire. Still not being obedient. Pung pung pung, Ling Han stomped on He Kun, causing him to groan in pain. Everyone sighed. Who else could be a match for Ling Han here? They looked towards Geng Xiandan, who was ranked 7th on the second level's current list. Then they looked towards Cheng Guangqi, who was ranked 9th, and Shi Yuan, who was ranked 10th. There were also the 3rd and 4th levels current list, and many of them were ranked in the top 500. These people's eyes flashed, and they were calculating their chances of winning against Ling Han. Under the suppression of strength, their chances of winning were less than 10%. In a battle of the same level, they only had 10%, and they were already the strongest on the current list. With this comparison, Ling Han's strength was obvious. Behave! Ling Han lowered his head to look at He Kun. He Kun clenched his teeth and did not speak. He was a 4th-step celestial venerable, so how could he not have this bit of backbone? He could lose, but he could not lose his momentum, and he could not lose his dignity. As long as he left, he would make Ling Han regret it. If you're not obedient, then I'll beat you until you are. Ling Han began to beat him again. He did not care, since he was not the one being beaten up. He Kun was miserable, and soon he was covered in wounds. But the self-healing ability of a celestial venerable was too strong. Even if he did not specialize in defense, a 4th-step celestial venerable was many times stronger than a 1st-step celestial venerable, so his self-healing ability was naturally stronger. He was constantly beaten, until he was seriously injured, and then quickly recovered. The cycle repeated endlessly, making him feel like he was better off dead than alive. This brat has a bit of my style in the past. The black donkey stood up, his face full of admiration. You're only at the 1st step now, so what do you mean by that? The large black dog mercilessly exposed him. This brat is like Grandpa Dog, and Grandpa Dog was the one who brought him up. Yuan Yinglong, on the other hand, felt dizzy. His legs swayed, and he couldn't stand steadily. He was really scared. He thought he had found a strong ally, but it turned out to be a super jinx. He Kun was stubborn, and refused to beg for mercy. This was his bottom line. If he begged for mercy in front of everyone, he wouldn't have the face to show his face in the future. Ling Han had nothing to do anyway, so he waited for the water level to drop as he fought. No one tried to persuade him again. Firstly, they were no match for Ling Han. Secondly, they didn't have any friendship with He Kun. Why should they ask for trouble? Just like that, 4 days later, the water level had dropped to a point where it could no longer be reached. Everyone jumped into the lake one after another. Now it had become a huge pit. Ling Han also sent He Kun flying with a kick. He couldn't kill He Kun. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to return to the Outer Realm battlefield in the future. He wasn't afraid that He Kun would seek revenge on him. In the second level, he was invincible, and he wouldn't be trapped here forever. When he reached the 2nd step, he definitely wouldn't have a problem fighting the 4th step. Let's go. He nodded at the Empress and the others. Everyone jumped into the original lake and rushed down. Boss, what should we do? Lai Guang asked. Yuan Yinglong gritted his teeth. We've already boarded the pirate ship, and now we can't get down. So, we'll follow Ling Han this time. After we leave, we'll think of a way to disassociate ourselves. Lai Guang and the others nodded. Ling Han took the lead. He stepped on the walls of the lake, and with a burst of power, his speed was extremely fast. In just less than half a day, everyone once again came to the surface of the lake. The lake water hadn't been drained, and the whirlpool had already disappeared. The water level had stopped dropping. However, they could already reach the bottom of the lake from here. It was only about 30,000 meters, and for heavenly venerables, this bit of distance was nothing at all. Thus, some people were eager to give it a try. It was only about 30,000 meters, so the water pressure shouldn't have reached an unbearable level, right? Let's go. Pu. Immediately, a great many people leaped into the bottom of the lake, and there were even a few 4th-step heavenly venerables among them. Ling Han and the Empress similarly leaped into the lake. They both had strength above 1 step and could sweep through everyone here. After entering the lake, Ling Han and the Empress immediately felt the pressure assault them, but the two of them spread out a shield, repelling the water pressure. At present, this pressure was nothing to them. The others also leaped into the lake one after another. At this time, everyone's strength could be seen. Some people could only dive for about 3,000 meters before they couldn't hold on any longer. Their shields were shattered, and under the crushing pressure of the water, their skin was immediately torn apart. Blood dyed the surrounding water red, and they had no choice but to float up. Otherwise, they would be seeking their own death. Some people only floated up when they reached 6,000 meters, while others could hold on until 30,000 meters. This was the most direct reflection of their strength. When they reached a depth of 15,000 meters, there were less than 100 people left. On Ling Han's side, aside from the heavenly venerable Fate-born and the Rain Emperor, the others had long since reached their limits, and Yuan Sheng and the Rain Emperor were also struggling, their shields on the verge of collapse. However, from here, they could see that heavenly venerable symbol even more clearly. Though it wasn't more visible, because the lake water was no longer rippling, the refractive index was further reduced, so it was naturally more vivid. The two of them stopped here and observed the symbol. Ling Han and the Empress continued to descend. They were far from reaching the limit. 60,000 meters, 70,000 meters. What surprised Ling Han was that there were actually others at this depth. Geng Xiandan, Cheng Guangqi, Shi Yuan, Shi Zhanghe, Shi Mingyu, and so on were all ranked at the top of the current rankings of each level. Instead, those few big shots of the 5th level had all disappeared. Cultivation level was suppressed here, and it had to be the ability to battle on the same level. It definitely wasn't that higher cultivation level was stronger. For example, Ling Han, the Empress, Geng Xiandan, and the others. These people had kept a low profile all this while, and only now did they explode with strength that surpassed 1 step. However, they were also very shocked. They hadn't thought that there would actually be so many people like them. They exchanged a look and continued to descend. Ling Han arrived. Now was the time when the 8 immortals crossed the sea, each displaying their own mystical abilities. The majority of people were wrapped in indistinct symbols, resisting the pressure of the lake water. And there were also a few who were like Ling Han and the Empress, very calm. They simply opened a shield and could resist with their own strength. Those who had manifested symbols obviously had grasped heavenly venerable symbols, and they weren't the 7 that had been passed down, but had obtained them from other sources. They were more powerful, and that was why they were able to support them to come here. But what concerned Ling Han more were those who hadn't manifested symbols. They could make it this far without using heavenly venerable symbols? Why? Ling Han looked at the Empress, and the Empress nodded at Ling Han. Most likely, these people had also grasped the unique power of several dimensions. Otherwise, there was no way to explain it. For example, the Empress's evolution index was only 11, but she could accommodate the power of 100 dimensions. Although there was Wally's theory and Ling Han's help in this, it still had to be said that this kind of difficulty was not so high that it couldn't be replicated. Chapter 2792. 20,000 zhang, 90,000 zhang. When they reached here, a few more people had been eliminated, and only Geng Xiandan, Shi Zhanghe, Shi Mingyu, Ling Han, and the Empress were left. Geng Xiandan, Shi Zhanghe, and Shi Mingyu also looked at Ling Han and the Empress in surprise. The two of them hadn't even used their heavenly venerate symbols yet, and were completely relying on their own strength to support themselves. This was the same as them. That was who could persevere to the end. Everyone continued to descend, but the last 3,000 meters felt an immense pressure. Not only had it reached the 2nd step, but it was also the late stage of the 2nd step, or even the peak stage. Even the Empress had no choice but to channel the heavenly venerable tear symbol to resist this frightening pressure. It couldn't be helped. The Empress was only in the early stage of the 1st step, and without using a secret technique, it was impossible for her to resist the battle prowess of the late stage of the 2nd step. Not only the Empress, but Geng Xiandan, Zhanghe, and Mingyu also activated their heavenly venerate symbols. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to withstand such pressure. One had to know that Geng Xiandan, Zhanghe, and the others had been here for God knows how many years, and they must have cultivated to the peak of their cultivation. With such a comparison, it could be seen that the amount of plain power they could accommodate was not as much as the Empress. When they finally reached the bottom of the lake, they saw that it was a wasteland with traces of battle everywhere. There were many corpses here, some of them as big as mountains, lying in disarray, making it impossible to look at them. Some of them were the size of a normal person, but the aura they emitted was not weak at all, making one's heart palpitate. These were the corpses of third-step heavenly venerables. Even after countless years, they still hadn't decayed, as if they had just died. The wounds on their bodies still had traces of blood. What about the celestial symbol? They searched everywhere, but there was no trace of the Empyrean symbol anywhere. They could be seen on the surface of the lake before. Why are they nowhere to be seen now? The symbol of the heavenly venerable rank won't arrive at any time either. Rather, it will only arrive after the ripples have appeared on the lake. In that case, we'll have to wait a little longer, Ling Han said to the Empress. The Empress nodded. The appearance of this symbol indeed required conditions. They waited, but none of them could maintain the heavenly venerate mark for long. Thus, Ling Han had the Empress float to the shore first. After the Empress left, Geng Xiandan and the others also left. There was no point in putting on a brave front. Ling Han was still walking at the bottom of the lake. Firstly, he wanted to know the specific situation. And secondly, he wanted to see if there was an Empyrean treasure. There was no lack of third-step Empyreans here in the past, so it wasn't strange for them to have Empyrean treasures. He continued to search, but treasures raised by Empyreans of the third step had long since developed intelligence. Once their master died, they would leave on their own. Perhaps they would directly transform into the Tao and revert to their original form, waiting for their new master to refine them and fight for another life. There were also some who roamed the world, hoping that one day they would be able to give birth to true intelligence and possess true life. Therefore, unless the Empyrean treasure was destroyed, it would be very difficult to discover the existence of an Empyrean treasure. However, the problem was that a third-step Empyrean didn't have the ability to destroy an Empyrean treasure. This was something that could only be done by a sixth-step Empyrean. While he was feeling sorry, he didn't know that the people on the lake were going crazy. Is this guy even human? Other people had to go all out and revolve their Empyrean symbols to withstand it. But how many Empyrean symbols were there? How long could they last? But how long had Ling Han been down there? Moreover, he didn't revolve his Empyrean symbols at all. Yet he could do things that others couldn't. How could they not be shocked? Just how powerful is this guy? After Ling Han circled around twice, he discovered a crack in the ground. This crack was very mystical. The water pressure was obviously great, but not a single drop of water leaked in. Ling Han wanted to go in, but he discovered that a powerful pressure assaulted him, causing his speed to immediately slow down. Then it was as if he was moving forward in a swamp, unable to take another step forward. Could it be that below was the true Empyrean tomb? The Empyrean symbols also came from this crack, which was why they were incomplete. Coupled with the turbulence of the lake water, they were blurry. Ling Han continuously tried to enter the fissure, but with every inch that he squeezed in, the pressure would increase by a fraction. It was as if there had only been 10 third-step heavenly venerables joining forces to stop him at the beginning, and then it had increased to 15, 20, and 50. Even he couldn't withstand it. He shook his head and returned to the shore. Hey, what's wrong with you guys? Ling Han looked around and saw that most of the people were looking at him in surprise, as if he had become some kind of monster. Everyone was speechless. Do you know what you've done? You're so strong that there's no justice in this world. Ling Han explained the situation, and everyone revealed excited expressions. If they could enter the crack, then they might be able to obtain that Empyrean symbol. Yuan Yinglong and the others were also very excited. Although they had been frightened before, they had now reaped the benefits. Ling Han glanced at them. He didn't hide this news from them, because he had previously promised Yuan Yinglong to act together. But he also noticed Yuan Yinglong's shortcomings, which made him unwilling to team up with him. This was the last time, and it could be considered as restoring Yinglong's previous favor. Now, everyone could only wait. Another dozen or so days passed, and everyone saw a dazzling light shoot up into the sky from the bottom of the lake. Then the water level began to drop again. Before long, the surface of the lake had completely disappeared. There was not a single trace of water left. If one stood at the bottom of the lake and looked around, it would be a huge plain. Let's go. Everyone landed one after another, all wanting to seize the initiative. Ling Han and the others also moved, jumping to the bottom of the lake. There were a large number of third-step Empyrean corpses here, which formed an extremely astonishing pressure. This was not a force, but a kind of suppression at the level of the divine soul. Therefore, except for third-step Empyreans who were unaffected, whether it was first-step or second-step Empyreans, they would feel a sense of pressure. Quasi-Empyreans and ninth-level immortal kings couldn't bear it at all, let alone quasi-Empyreans and ninth-level immortal kings. Their destination was clear, and that was the crack in the ground. Soon they arrived at the place. Ling Han moved forward, and sure enough, the pressure at the crack disappeared. "Thank you." A voice came from behind. Ling Han turned his head, and saw that it was Geng Xiandan. "What's there to thank?" Ling Han asked. "Thank you for finding this entrance for me," Geng Xiandan said. Ling Han laughed. "Do you think you can bask in my glory? Don't think that just because you had the upper hand before, your combat strength is above mine," Geng Xiandan said lightly, appearing very confident. "I also thank you." Another person appeared. "Cheng Guangqi." Swish, a third figure landed. It was Shi Yuan. Then more powerhouses came over, such as Shi Mingyu, Shi Zhanghe, and several powerhouses on the 5th floor. They all stared coldly at Ling Han. Even if they were no match for Ling Han in this special place, the Celestial Master symbol might be right in front of them. Who would retreat? Haha, there's no need to start a conflict at this time. Shi Mingyu tried to smooth things over. Anyway, when the Celestial Master symbol first appeared, everyone can figure it out. Why don't we all join hands? Chapter 2794. All that madness had created were death warriors who only knew how to fight, and were not afraid of death. Its goal was not to rule the entire origin world, but to devour the entire origin world, and turn it into a part of its own body. Under such a premise, as long as it was an intelligent life form, it should resist it. Otherwise, when the origin world was destroyed, would I still be me? Would I still be me? Becoming a celestial venerable meant surpassing heaven and earth, and transcending the mortal world. What kind of freedom was that? Who would be willing to be a part of another powerhouse's body that could be erased at any time? Thus, Ling Han believed that these remnants of madness, who had developed self-awareness, would definitely not be willing to return to its body of madness and serve the other to the death. As far as madness was concerned, it did not care about its own creation at all. Its goal was to use them for battle, to exhaust the powerhouses of the fiery frost dimension, and finally to complete its goal of devouring the fiery frost dimension. What do you know? Immediately, an important figure glared at Ling Han. "Are you trying to collude with the enemy?" Helikun said coldly. He wanted to give Ling Han a huge crime. Then, after he left this place, he would be able to attack Ling Han openly. This topic was very sensitive. Immediately, the powerhouses on the 5th floor all looked at Ling Han coldly. Even Shi Mingyu, Shi Zhanghe, and the other third-step celestial venerables had unfriendly expressions. In the long history of the origin world, there was no lack of cowardly celestial venerables who were afraid of death and turned to madness. They worked together with the Madness Army, causing the Fiery Frost Dimension's army to suffer heavy losses. Thus, what everyone hated the most were those who colluded with the enemy. Once discovered, they would be executed immediately. Yuan Yinglong hurriedly retreated with his subordinates, maintaining an absolute distance from Ling Han to show that he had nothing to do with Ling Han. If it was anything else, he could endure it and go his separate ways with Ling Han when he returned. But colluding with the enemy was too serious. If he did not quickly draw a clear line between himself and Ling Han, Then no one would cry out for him, even if they were killed together. This was a great taboo, an absolute taboo. How dare you? Wu Feng stared at Ling Han. In the eyes of a fourth-step celestial venerable, no matter how monstrous Ling Han was, he was still a minor character. The fiery frost dimension did not lack geniuses, but if he was a collaborator, he to be killed without mercy. Ling Han laughed. Which eyes of you think I colluded with the enemy? These people clearly want to leave madness and go to the light. To be of two, why not to them? A thief for a day, a thief for a lifetime, Shen Fei said coldly, appearing extremely disdainful. This was to of to celestial Shen. To say. To Ling Han to. Shen Fei couldn't help but explode in anger. How could there be such a rascal? They were just talking nicely, so why did he suddenly curse? If this had been the 5th floor, he would definitely have slapped Ling Han to death with a single slap. A mere level 1 cultivator dared to be so arrogant. This was a great disrespect. But now, he could only endure it. He waved his sleeves and said no more. Ling Han, don't ruin the grand scheme. He Kun said coldly. There was no way he would kill a supreme genius for no reason. There were many major figures protecting Ling Han. However, if Ling Han were to be accused of colluding with the enemy, who else would speak up for him? Zhou Heng, Chu Hao or Lin Luo? Not a single one. Ling Han said to He Kun. You actually managed to take 4 steps with such a narrow mind. You really surprised me. He Kun's face couldn't help but turn black. Wasn't this pointing at his nose and saying that he wasn't qualified to be a 4th-step sky sovereign? However, when he remembered that Ling Han was a monster who was invincible among his peers, he could only endure it. It was fine. Everything that was happening now was to make sure that Ling Han was determined. As long as he became a collaborator, he would become a public enemy. This little brother has such intelligence, so why can't the rest of you have some magnanimity? A 7-legged elephant man said from among the remaining frenzy survivors. It was a 3rd-step celestial venerable, so calling Ling Han little brother was naturally already raising his status. Talking about magnanimity with you beasts? Wu Feng sneered. How can we face our dead brothers? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. More than a dozen figures landed. The crack was not hidden, and as long as one's strength reached the late stage of the 1st step, they could force their way through. Therefore, as time passed, more and more people came. The advantages and disadvantages of both sides were being balanced. It would not be long before the Fire Frost Plains side would have the upper hand. It would be an absolute and overwhelming advantage. Everyone's aura grew stronger. Even if they were to fight now, they would not be afraid. Everyone, we are very sincere, said Sheiji. Her upper body was human, but her lower body was still that of a snake. However, it could not hide her seductive charm. It made people's hearts palpitate. Very sincere, right? Wu Feng nodded. Then surrender. That is true sincerity. How could the Chaos Remnants agree? They all revealed expressions of anger. They had already said all they could. But was it so difficult to survive? Do you really have to force us? The 4 tiger men said coldly. Haha, you've revealed your true colors. Shi Zhanghe laughed. Those who were not of my race definitely had ill intentions. Let's do it, Wu Feng said. They already had more than 80 people. They were only slightly inferior in terms of numbers, so they could start the battle. Both sides immediately drew their swords, and the battle was about to begin. Wait, Ling Han stepped forward bravely. Why don't you give each other a chance? You. He pointed at a few people at random. You can guarantee that you won't die in battle after the battle ends. Those people were silent. How could they guarantee that? We are going to fight a long war, so we have to fight for every bit of strength, Ling Han said again. As expected, you've defected to the enemy, He Kun said coldly. Ling Han laughed loudly and stood in the middle of the 2 sides. All right, whoever wants to attack today will have to get past me first. Ling Han. Everyone called out, each with different thoughts. Are you really going to serve chaos? Geng Xiandan asked coldly. Ling Han shook his head. I don't serve anyone. I just want to unite all forces to fight against chaos. I don't want to let our own people bleed and die in a battle that can be avoided. Then there's nothing more to say. Wang Xiangrong shook his head, his killing intent blazing. Xiao xiao xiao. Immediately, a few people attacked at the same time, attacking Ling Han. He Li Kun, Wang Xiangrong, Bai Li Ge, and Geng Xiandan were all elites of their respective levels, who could be listed on the current rankings. When these people attacked together, their combat power was extremely terrifying. Ling Han snorted and punched out. Pung! These people flew back at the same time. They were not his match at all. In this place where cultivation was suppressed, his combat power could reach the peak of level 3. Who could beat him? Hiss! Everyone sucked in a cold breath. This combat power was too terrifying. Now you can listen to what I have to say. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back. His gaze swept across them. And even a level 2 heavenly venerable's heart involuntarily shrank. Ling Han, do you really want to become enemies with the whole world? He Li Kun had fallen very heavily. He bared his teeth as he shouted at Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly. Don't flatter yourself. You can't represent the world. He Li Kun gritted his teeth. He was a level 4 heavenly venerable, a supreme existence even in a medium dimension. Why couldn't he represent the world? Xiao xiao xiao. More and more people entered, and the number of people on the pyro dimensions side reached as high as 200. In terms of numbers, they had the upper hand. There's no need to talk about rules when dealing with people who collude with the enemy. Let's attack together, Shen Fei said as he walked out first. Chapter 2795. A fourth step heavenly venerable. Who would dare disobey such an important figure? You forced us to do this. The frenzy survivors also stepped forward, standing side by side with Ling Han. You forced us to do this. The frenzy survivors also stepped forward, standing side by side with Ling Han. This scene was extremely out of place. Ling Han stood with his hands clasped behind his back amidst the crowd. His figure was pitifully small in comparison, but he stood out like a crane in a flock of chickens. Ling Han, repent before it's too late. Shi Mingyu was still trying to persuade him. Don't waste any more time with him. He asked for it, He Li Kun said impatiently. Xiao xiao xiao. Dozens more people entered, bringing the number of powerhouses from the Frostflame Plain to more than 300. With the suppression of power, 300 versus 100 was a crushing advantage. Pay attention, the 12-headed lion man suddenly said. Pay attention to what? Suddenly, the ground began to tremble. Wang, a beam of light rose from the ground. Gold filled the air, and the power of heaven and earth instantly became incomparably lively. Heavenly venerable symbol. My power has recovered. The suppression of power has disappeared. Everyone cried out in surprise. The second step and third step heavenly venerables had instantly recovered their full power. But the fourth step heavenly venerables were still suppressed, and could only use the power of a third step heavenly venerable. Spatial overlap. We're currently in the fourth layer. Everyone here was smart, and they immediately figured out the reason. Ha ha ha. He Li Kun laughed heartily as he stared at Ling Han. Although the suppression of power had not completely disappeared, he already had the power of a third step heavenly venerable. Suppressing Ling Han would be as easy as flipping his hand. Ling Han, come out and die. Don't you feel shameless bullying the weak? The 12-headed lion man said. He took a step forward. Come, I'll be your opponent. Boom. The power within his body surged. It wasn't just him. The other beasts also released their power, and a terrifying aura swept out like a tsunami. Everyone's expressions changed. Only now did they realize that this was spatial overlap. After the suppression of power had changed to the fourth layer, these beasts would also recover their full power. Moreover, all 100 of them had taken 3 steps, unlike the Frostflame Plains side, where 250 out of 300 people had taken 1 step. 4-step Celestial Venerable here. 4-step Empyreans were suppressed. Before they could only be used as 1 step, but now, it was only 3 steps. There were only a few people here. So how could they reverse the situation? He Li Kun's expression turned ugly. Naturally, he had also thought of this. Their advantage in numbers was no longer useful. The other side had more than 100 third-step martial artists, while they only had 20 to 30. It was impossible to increase their numbers any further. Ling Han smiled. No need. I can handle this kind of trash myself. He took a few steps forward. He-Kun, I'll give you a chance. Come and fight. Not only He-Kun, everyone was stunned. Did he really think that he was invincible? Now that the space has overlapped, the power suppression here has been relaxed to 3 steps. Your strength as a first step Heavenly Venerable won't increase. So where did you find the courage to challenge? He-Kun was a little embarrassed. If he accepted the challenge, he would be bullying the weak. But if he didn't accept the challenge, he wouldn't even dare to accept the challenge of a first step Empyrean. But he immediately snorted. As long as he made Ling Han look like a traitor, what did it matter? It was everyone's duty to kill the traitor. He strode forward, pressing towards Ling Han. The 12-headed lion man frowned. Little friend. It's fine. Ling Han waved his hand. He wasn't afraid of anyone below 4 steps. You asked for it. He-Kun reached out and grabbed at Ling Han. As far as he was concerned, it would definitely be a piece of cake for Ling Han to grab him. Ling Han clenched his fist and punched back at He-Kun. Bang! In the collision, He-Kun's outstretched hand was immediately shattered. Ugh! He-Kun groaned. He raised his hand, and a bloody wound appeared on his palm. Although the hand he had stretched out had been condensed from his strength, it had been shattered by Ling Han's attack, and the backlash had injured his hand. What? Everyone was stunned. How could a mere first step Heavenly Venerable have the strength of a third step Empyrean? Could it be that the space had stacked again, and they had returned to the suppression of a first step Empyrean? However, the expressions of the second step, third step, and fourth step Empyreans changed. They naturally knew that their strength had been restored to its peak, or that it had been suppressed to the third step Empyrean. In that case, either He-Kun hadn't used his full strength, or Ling Han had the strength of a third step Empyrean. They were all willing to believe the former. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to believe or understand Ling Han's strength. You, He-Kun pointed at Ling Han, the expression on his face very interesting. I didn't expect that not only were you not crippled, but you even improved to such a monstrous level. Possessing the strength of a third step Empyrean in just 1 step was really unbelievable. Cut the crap. Do you dare to fight? Ling Han said coldly. This time it's a life and death battle. Previously he didn't have a good reason to kill He-Kun, but this fellow had actually slandered him as a traitor. This was intolerable to Ling Han. Stabbing someone in the back was a lowly character. He-Kun took a deep breath. Alright, let's fight. He had been at a disadvantage in the previous attack, because he had underestimated Ling Han. This was also normal. Who would have thought that a first step Empyrean could be so fierce? However, he was a fourth step Empyrean. Even if his strength was suppressed to the third step, his combat strength was definitely at the peak of the third step. He didn't believe that he would lose to Ling Han. He had already lost to Ling Han once at the first step Empyrean. If he still didn't dare to fight at the third step Empyrean, then he really didn't deserve to be called a human. He charged out again, launching a wild attack at Ling Han. Boom, boom, boom. He waved his hands continuously, and balls of light shot out from his hands, bombarding the ground below. Ling Han met them fearlessly, going against the balls of light and attacking He-Kun. The two of them closed in on each other, and immediately began a fierce battle. This time He-Kun didn't lose. His strength had reached the peak of the third step Empyrean, while Ling Han was also at the third step Empyrean level. Perhaps he hadn't reached the peak of the third step Empyrean level, so He-Kun definitely had the upper hand in the battle. Sure enough, in the fierce battle, Ling Han was obviously weaker, but the disadvantage wasn't too great. Everyone was shocked. They had naturally expected He-Kun to be so fierce. It would be strange if he wasn't strong when he had suppressed a fourth step Empyrean to a third step Empyrean. However, Ling Han was only at the first step Empyrean level. How could he be so fierce? The corners of Geng Xiandan, Shi Mingyu, and Shi Zhanghe's mouths twitched. They had roughly guessed the reason why Ling Han could be so powerful, and that was because he had extracted the unique power of more than one Empyrean level. In fact, Ling Han wasn't the first to have such an idea. After so many years of development, martial art had naturally researched various possibilities to integrate more Empyrean level. However, the predecessors had all encountered a bottleneck that they couldn't break through, and that was the limit to the amount of plane energy they could fuse. At most, they could fuse 900 plane energy, and no one could break through 1,000. Like them, they had fused with dozens of dimensional forces, and could just about skip a step to battle. However, geniuses like them were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Only the top 100 on the current ranking board could reach each level. In the origin world, on average, each plane wouldn't even get one, which showed how few people there were. Chapter 2796. Just how many planes' powers had Ling Han fused with? No one knew, but everyone knew that this must be a shocking amount. Otherwise, it was impossible for a first-step Heavenly Venerable to have the power of a third-step Heavenly Venerable. Although He had not been able to fuse with more than one power of the plane, he had heard that one could use this kind of method to become stronger after achieving the third step. Thus, he very quickly thought of the secret behind Ling Han's strength. He was shocked, and told himself that he had to take advantage of this opportunity to kill Ling Han. Otherwise, when this guy reached the second step, even if there was no power to suppress him, he would not be able to deal with Ling Han. Thus, this was his only chance. Kill. He drew out his heavenly venerable treasure. This was a dark gold spear. He swept it, and boom, 7 symbols lit up on the spear. These were heavenly venerable symbols. Dark moon spear, he shouted softly, and with a thrust of the spear, the whole world became dark, but a dark moon rose behind him, exuding a strange aura. He went all out, using his heavenly venerable treasure technique, treasure tool, and symbols. He wanted to suppress Ling Han in the shortest time possible. Ling Han also drew out his divine demon sword and charged at He. The heavenly venerable treasure tools collided, and the two used their treasured techniques, both releasing their strongest power. Although He was a fourth-step heavenly venerable, he had only mastered 7 heavenly venerable symbols. He used them one by one, resonating with the symbols on the spear, erupting with even greater power. But as long as he had a heavenly venerable treasure, how could he not have mastered these 7 heavenly venerable symbols? Could he take advantage? The two continued to exchange blows. He could not gain the upper hand at all, and the heavenly venerable symbols could only release power for a limited time. After 14 hours, He could not use the symbols, and his battle prowess rapidly fell. In most cases, this wasn't important. It could be said with certainty that 99% of celestial venerables only grasped 7 legacy symbols. As for the Rain Emperor and Yi, because they didn't have celestial venerable treasures, they didn't even grasp these 7 legacy symbols. But Ling Han was different. When he became a first-step heavenly venerable, he obtained a broken symbol. Although it was incomplete, its power surpassed the 7 heavenly venerable symbols. While He battle prowess had plummeted, Ling Han's battle prowess had increased instead. This was because he had activated this broken symbol, which he called the 8th symbol. As time went by, the originally balanced combat power suddenly had a huge disparity. Ling Han's sword slashed out. Although He used the Dark Moon Spear to block, he was completely unable to block the power of Ling Han, and was sent flying by a single strike. Ling Han moved his feet and chased after him. He kept striking with his sword. Ding ding ding. He was also parrying, but every time he received a blow, his expression would change drastically. He felt as if his chest was boiling, and it was indescribably uncomfortable. After over 10 strikes, He was sent flying. With a bang, he crashed onto the ground and created a deep pit. His entire person vanished. However, it was only for an instant. With a bang, the ground split open, and He had already killed his way out. He held the Dark Moon Spear in his hand, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. His hair was disheveled, and he seemed to be in an extremely sorry state. The difference in battle prowess was more than 10 times. This was naturally the result of a head-on clash. He cast a deep look at Ling Han. He did not plan to continue the battle, and instead wanted to leave immediately. As long as he could recover his strength, even a freak like Ling Han would not be able to withstand a single blow from him. He still had this bit of confidence. How could Ling Han possibly let him leave? He chased after him. However, It had to be said that in a situation where their strength was about the same, it was really too difficult for one party to escape and the other to stop them. He set off first and maintained a slight lead. No matter what Ling Han did, he could not close the gap. Fortunately, there was only one exit here, and it was impossible to be fast when passing through the crack. There was enough time for Ling Han to stop He. Just as the crack was about to arrive, Hong, an attack mightily struck out, directly attacking Ling Han. This was the power of the third step. Ling Han had no choice but to turn around and punch out. Pung! Energy exploded and set off a superstorm that reverberated in this underground world. He turned around and saw that He had already escaped through the crack. Although it required time, it was only a moment fleeting. He would definitely not be able to catch up now. Ling Han's expression was gloomy. He turned around again and faced the person who had attacked him. It was Shunfei. Seeing that Ling Han looked angry and was about to attack, Shunfei chuckled. I have to admit that your battle prowess is really shocking. However, Brother Wu, Brother Zhao, and Brother Niu will all advance and retreat with me. You are fighting 1 against 4. Do you think you have any chance of winning? The people he had pointed out were all 4th step celestial venerables, and now they still had battle prowess at the peak of the 3rd step. Ling Han was very strong, and was almost invincible among the 3rd steps. However, he was only one person after all. How shameless, the 12-headed lion person said coldly. I really don't like you. Brothers, let's beat this guy up together. Okay. The other beast race members all nodded. Shunfei's expression changed drastically. If they were on the 5th level, he would naturally not fear these people, and could suppress them with a flip of his hand. However, now that over 100 3rd-step celestial venerables had swarmed over, how could the 4 of them resist? Don't be rash. I can promise to bring you out and let the higher-ups decide your fate, Shunfei hurriedly said. He knew that most people had the same thoughts as him. Thus, there was no harm in calming these beast race members down first. In any case, none of them would be able to escape. Hee, let's not worry about that for now. Let's beat them up first, a 6-armed monkey said. He had a bad temper, and was the first to attack, shooting towards Shunfei. As he moved, the other beast race members also attacked. Instantly, it became over 100 beast race members ganging up on the 4 of them. This was naturally an absolute suppression, and Shermingyu and the other 3rd-step celestial venerables did not dare to interfere. Fortunately, these beast race members really only wanted to beat Shunfei and the others up, and did not have any intention of taking their lives. Brother Ling, you should persuade them, Shermingyu said to Ling Han. She had always been a smooth-talking person. She couldn't possibly let 4 4th-step celestial venerables be beaten to death, right? Even if they weren't beaten to death, it wouldn't be good for them to be beaten up like this. How would they be able to face others in the future? Ling Han shrugged. I'm not from the same country as them. Why would they listen to me? Do you really think I've colluded with the enemy? There was no way he was going to try and persuade him. It was Shunfei who had intervened and let He escape, but he still hadn't vented his anger and still wanted him to stand up for him. To dream Shermingyu couldn't persuade him anymore. Since Ling Han had already said such words, she was speechless. After beating them up for half a day, the monkey lion man and the other beasts finally stopped. Shunfei and the other 3 were all bruised and swollen, looking extremely miserable. The 4 of them were so ashamed that they wanted to die. A dignified 4th-step heavenly venerable was actually beaten up by a group of 3. How could they endure this? However, none of them had any intention of risking their lives. If they didn't even have this bit of endurance, how could they have reached the 4th step? They'll get their revenge. Chapter 2798. Shermingyu was quite excited and said, Senior was the most famous person on the 4th level back then, ranking 9th in the overall battle record. Even now, I can still reach Senior's ranking on the overall list, but I was only pushed down to the 12th place. Zhuang Fairway was surprised. It has only been a few eras, and I have been pushed down to the 3rd place. Although he did not stay on the 4th level for a long time, he was too monstrous, and had killed his way to the 9th place on the overall list. If not for the fact that he was forced to fight on the second level due to the spatial overlap, causing him to lose the advantage of the city defense and be trapped here, his battle record would have been much more outstanding. Perhaps he would have been the first place on the overall list. Even so, as long as the battle was so tragic back then, he still survived and went one step further to become a fourth step heavenly venerable. It could be seen how monstrous he was. Geng Xiandan nodded. In the recent era, there have been a few incomparably monstrous existences, such as Lord Lin Yulian, Lord Xan Qihu, and Lord Wu Haoyang, who only took 1 billion years to cultivate to become a fourth step heavenly venerable. Zhuang Fairway revealed a solemn expression. They really can't be underestimated. All right, we should leave this place now, he said. As a fourth step heavenly venerable and the strongest genius, he naturally gave orders. However, before that there are still 2 things to be done. First, get the heavenly venerable symbol here. Everyone nodded. This was also their main purpose for coming here. Second, Zhuang Fairway revealed a dense killing intent. Kill all the remnants of madness. Ling Han frowned and said, Senior Zhuang, those mutants have already developed their own consciousness and will no longer work for madness. We can absorb them into our team and increase our strength. Zhuang Fairway walked towards Ling Han and revealed a displeased expression. You are just a third step, and you dare to criticize me? When I was fighting a bloody battle, where were you? What kind of genius was he? Back then, countless people had treated him well. In the future, he would definitely reach the 5th step, and it was not impossible for him to reach the 6th or 7th step. Now, a mere first step junior actually dared to question his decision. How could he not be angry? After several epochs, he could only turtle up here and cultivate every day. It would be strange if his personality wasn't twisted at all. Ling Han shook his head. You're just a member of the Firefrost Plane. What right do you have to make a decision? Because I'm Zhuang Fairway. Zhuang Fairway said coldly as he reached out to grab Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out a hand to parry. Pung! A shockwave instantly burst forth from the arms of the 2 of them, and was transmitted in all directions. Instantly, a considerable number of people were sent tumbling to the ground. Zhuang Fairway revealed a look of surprise. Although it was just a casual attack, it shouldn't have been something a first step heavenly venerate could block. You have some ability. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant in front of me. He attacked once again. This time, the power that erupted from him was even more terrifying. Ling Han's eyes widened. The power of this attack had actually exceeded 3 steps. He hurriedly revolved an Empyrean symbol and greeted Zhuang Fairway. Pung! The 2 of their hands collided again. Ling Han frowned. He seemed to have blocked this attack again. But it should be known that Zhuang Fairway hadn't used his Empyrean symbol. In other words, when the other took 1 step, the amount of plain power that he had extracted was definitely not small. Perhaps a few, perhaps a dozen, or even a few dozen. Ling Han was no longer surprised. There were actually many prodigies who had broken through this way, and it wasn't just him and the Empress. However, Ling Han believed that aside from him, the others should be like the Empress, fusing the plain power that they extracted into a core, and not turning themselves into an origin world like him. Of course, this number was relative. It was limited to the top prodigies, and there might only be a dozen or so on each level. However, Zhuang Fairway had an absolute advantage in cultivation level after all. Even if the level of cultivation of the first step was far inferior to Ling Han's, he could still rely on his advantage in cultivation level to win. If I want to kill someone, can you stop me? Zhuang Fairway attacked again and again, each move domineering. Ling Han didn't say anything, and only continued to exchange blows with Zhuang Fairway. If I want to kill you, can you escape? Zhuang Fairway continued, showing his incredible confidence. His power grew stronger and stronger, and he was almost at the 4th step. Ling Han resisted with all his might. He wasn't someone who gave up easily. Everyone shook their heads. What a pity. Ling Han's freakishness was definitely not inferior to Zhuang Fairway's, and he might even surpass it. However, there was no other way. Who asked the difference in their cultivation levels to be too great? If I want to kill you now, what are you going to do? Zhuang Fairway had already completely taken the initiative. He released his power further, and his battle prowess had already advanced to the fourth step, suppressing Ling Han to the point where he could barely defend. Just a mere first step Empyrean, Zhuang Fairway said disdainfully. He probably hadn't spoken much in these few epochs, and there had only been 4 people. Thus, Zhuang Fairway's desire to show off was very strong. After all, he was the strongest heaven's pride back then. What he hated the most was people who didn't listen to his orders. Ling Han was fighting bitterly. He wasn't trying to show off, because he still had a message talisman that Chu Hao had given him. As long as he tore it open, he would be able to explode with the destructive power of a 5th step, which was enough to kill Zhuang Fairway. Even if this place suppressed his power, the techniques of a 6th step Empyrean should not be affected. Thus, if he was forced to, Ling Han would definitely take out the message talisman to fight. However, before that, he still wanted to test his own power and see to what extent he could fight against Zhuang Fairway. Zhuang Fairway had been lonely for too long. He didn't stop talking, constantly mocking Ling Han and humiliating him to show off his strength. The others also gave him face and expressed their admiration for Zhuang Fairway's battle prowess. After all, he was indeed the strongest person in the 4th level back then, and countless people admired him. Now that he was still alive and had even advanced to the 4th step under such terrible circumstances, they naturally admired him. In comparison, Ling Han's way of doing things was too unique, and he didn't give others any face at all. Now that he was at a disadvantage, naturally no one would help him. After all, the Empress and the others were alone. Fortunately, they knew that Ling Han still had a trump card, so they weren't anxious. In 3 moves, I'll make you kneel and beg for mercy, Zhuang Fairway said proudly. He already couldn't be bothered to tangle with Ling Han. A Empyrean symbol waved, and he wanted to completely suppress Ling Han. Ling Han sighed. This was really all he could do. Once Zhuang Fairway went all out, he would have to use Chu Hao's message talisman. Just as he was about to take out the message talisman, boom! Heaven and earth shook violently, and an indescribable power attacked, affecting everyone. My power is being suppressed again. Damn it, the planes are stacking again, and our power is being suppressed back to 1 step. The 2nd step and 3rd step Empyreans said unhappily. Then, they suddenly thought of a possibility, and they all rushed towards Ling Han. Ling Han let out a long howl and punched out heavily, landing on Zhuang Fairway's hand. In the surging force, Zhuang Fairway was instantly sent flying by the punch, and his figure rapidly shrunk. Then with a bang, he crashed into the rock stratum at the top, his limbs spread out, forming the Chinese character. Chapter 2799. Just now, Zhuang Fairway was incomparably strong, suppressing Ling Han to the point where he could not retaliate at all. But now, things had taken a turn, and Zhuang Fairway was actually sent flying by a single punch from Ling Han. Everyone knew the reason. It was simple. In a battle of the same level, Zhuang Fairway was not Ling Han's opponent. Zhuang Fairway flew out from the rock layer. His eyes were spitting fire, and his black hair moved without any wind. This time he was truly furious. After becoming a celestial venerable, he had never suffered such a loss. Moreover, he had the upper hand previously, expressing his strong disdain for Ling Han, saying that he could not afford to be defeated by him. But now, he was sent flying with a single punch, which was equivalent to throwing all the humiliating words he had said previously onto his head. How could he not fly into a rage out of humiliation? Without another word, he directly charged over, wanting to overturn Ling Han and wash away his shame. In a battle of the same level, I can easily suppress you. Ling Han attacked, pressing towards Zhuang Fairway. However, Zhuang Fairway was a super genius after all. Although he was not as monstrous as Ling Han, his cultivation level was suppressed, but his strength still reached the 2nd step. Just now, Ling Han had used the strength of the 3rd step to fight against the 4th step, but now, he was using the strength of the 3rd step to bully the 2nd step. In fact, the gap between the 2 sides was still a level, but the difference in strength and weakness was completely reversed. This time, It was Zhuang Fairway who was bitterly holding on. He used his celestial venerable symbols one by one, and even activated his celestial venerable treasure technique. But he could only barely hold on, just like Ling Han before. Arrogant continued to be arrogant. Ling Han snorted. His fists were like rain, and his attack speed became faster and faster. Zhuang Fairway gritted his teeth and held on. He was extremely unwilling to lower his head in front of Ling Han. To a proud person like him, this was even more unbearable than killing him. He had faith that the space here was changing rapidly, and it might not be long before he returned to the 4th level. At that time, he would definitely make Ling Han well. Haha, then I'll suppress you first. Ling Han didn't dare to be too careless. The overlapping planes here were too strange. No one knew when they would enter the 4th layer, and when they would return to the 2nd layer. Pung pung pung. His punches were tyrannical, and Zhuang Fairway's face was covered in blood. It was a tragic sight. Shi Mingyu and the others were completely speechless. A battle at the same level could best show who was more monstrous. And without a doubt, that person was Ling Han. Just how perverted is this guy? Just how much realm power did he extract? However, countless facts had proven that it was impossible for the total amount of planar power to exceed 1,000. Otherwise, even if one could withstand it for a while, as the planar power continued to increase, it would eventually cause one's body to explode. This was because cultivators all started from the 1st step, and then the 2nd step. It was true that a cultivator at the 6th step could suppress more than 1,000 low-level planar power. But could it be that the strength of a cultivator at the 6th step had come out of thin air? This was a paradox. To control more than 1,000 wisps of planar power, one would need at least the strength of a 5th step. However, to cultivate planar power, one had to start from the 1st step at the very least. How could this be achieved? It was precisely because these people were all geniuses that they were even more confused. For example, Shi Mingyu and the others also had dozens of wisps of planar power in their bodies, but this was their limit. Just one more wisp would cause their bodies to explode. How could Ling Han be so ferocious? Pung! Ling Han kicked out, landing a kick on Zhuang Fairway's lower abdomen, sending him flying. He quickly chased after him. Pung pung pung. With a series of kicks, he kicked Zhuang Fairway into two. However, the vitality of a celestial venerable was too strong. With a thought, the two halves of Zhuang Fairway's body were pieced back together. Primal chaos currents circulated, and the wound rapidly disappeared. Pung! He had just barely managed to heal the wound when his face was punched by Ling Han again. Half of his face was instantly gone. The battle continued while he was being abused, and his injuries continued to worsen. Without anyone to help him, he did not dare to do so. Right now Ling Han's battle prowess was at the 3rd step. Anyone who went up against him would only end up being abused. Zhuang Fairway did not dare to take this head-on. He began to flee to delay for time. As long as the space overlapped again, he would begin to counterattack and avenge his previous humiliation. One was fleeing, and the other was chasing. Their strength was inferior by a realm, and it was already very difficult for Zhuang Fairway to escape. In addition, the space here was limited, so it was even more difficult for Zhuang Fairway to escape. He was continuously being struck. His arms, legs, and head were broken. It was a tragic sight. Geng Xiandan, Wu Yufeng by Legay and Shi Mingyu all sighed. In their minds, Zhuang Fairway was so strong that he was almost invincible. Back then, he had been hailed as the strongest genius, but now, he was actually being chased around like this. It really made them sigh. The prodigies of this generation were the ones who truly transcended eras. Lin Yulian, Exa and Chihu, and the other two heavenly kings had caused many of the older generation's powerhouses to blush with shame. They had originally thought that Ling Han was already at the end of his life, but they had never expected that this guy was only stabilizing his strength. Once he erupted, he would be world-shaking. All of a sudden, golden light filled the air, and the celestial venerable symbol appeared again. Everyone turned their attention to it. Even if Shi Mingyu worshipped Zhuang Fairway like an idol, she still firmly shifted her gaze away. He had already reached the celestial venerable realm, and he had long since set aside his personal feelings. There was nothing more important than great strength. There are even more symbols this time, Wu Yufeng exclaimed. He had already been here for several epochs, and every time the celestial venerable symbol appeared, he would naturally comprehend it as well. The others also nodded. The celestial venerable symbol that had manifested this time was indeed more numerous and more complete than before. Furthermore, it was no longer blurry, as if it was about to float up from the ground. They hurriedly began to comprehend it. Once the celestial venerable symbol truly appeared, it would not last for long, and it would quickly dissipate from the world. In reality, if not for the fact that this was where the two planes had collided, the celestial venerable symbol would not have existed at all, and it would have long since been obliterated. Ling Han also stopped. Zhuang Fairway was just about to turn his head towards the celestial venerable symbol, but Ling Han did not even bother to turn his head. He directly punched Zhuang Fairway in the face, and Zhuang Fairway immediately collapsed. He no longer ravaged Zhuang Fairway, and instead focused on comprehending this symbol. Indeed, the symbol this time was more complete, but this was also relative. It was almost fully manifested, but it was still very clear, and no longer blurry. The entire place was silent, and everyone was trying to figure out this celestial venerable symbol. No one knew how many celestial venerable symbols there were in this world, but as long as one appeared, it would cause a fight to the death. Everyone had their own selfish motives, and they had to fight against the madness, but they also had to become stronger. This time, the celestial venerable symbol seemed to have truly manifested, and golden light shone brilliantly, not dissipating for a long time. Zhuang Fairway slowly woke up, and after climbing to his feet, he wanted to make a move, but when his gaze swept across that golden light, he forcibly restrained himself. The celestial venerable symbol was first, and he would settle the score with Ling Han after obtaining it. He also sat down cross-legged and began to figure out the celestial venerable symbol, but his expression immediately changed. Because this celestial venerable symbol had actually shattered. It could not be maintained for long, and was about to dissipate into the world. Chapter 2800. Xiao Xiao Xiao. Instantly, over a dozen people rushed out at the same time, breaking into the ground. Everyone knew that the heavenly venerable symbol had truly manifested, but it was also because of this that it could not last for too long. Very soon, it would shatter and disappear. Thus, they had to dive underground to see the true appearance of the heavenly venerable symbol. No one knew how long this symbol could last, so they had to be quick. Ling Han, the Empress, Zhuang Fairway, and the others were all among them. They continued to advance underground, searching for the true location of the heavenly venerable symbol. However, the more they advanced, the greater the pressure in front of them. It was as if ordinary people had entered a swamp, and every step was difficult. Pung pung pung. As they advanced, they were still fighting. The heavenly venerable symbol had already appeared, and only one person could receive the transmission. Thus they had to fight for it now. No matter who you were, they would not give way. Hong. Zhuang Fairway attacked Ling Han. He saw Ling Han as his strongest opponent. Ling Han sent him flying with a kick, but immediately afterward, he made a soft sound of surprise. The planes overlapped again, and this place became the fourth layer. Ling Han, now it's my turn. Zhuang Fairway laughed loudly, charging towards Ling Han. He naturally felt that his power had recovered, at least to when he was at level 3. He charged back, his power skyrocketing, and instantly completely crushed Ling Han. Of course, now was not the time to settle this. After Zhuang Fairway sent Ling Han flying, he charged forward again. Ha! He had just charged out a few steps when he frowned, because the space overlapped again. Ling Han charged over and crushed him. However, Ling Han had only advanced a little when the plane's suppression relaxed to the fourth layer. Ling Han shook his head. This was not the planes constantly overlapping, but the second and fourth layers of space here had collided together. There was something in you, and there was something in me, and there was something in me, which was why such a situation occurred. Zhuang Fairway and Ling Han continued to fight. Sometimes, Zhuang Fairway would gain the upper hand, and other times it would be Ling Han. The two of them were constantly exchanging advantages and disadvantages, and it was completely decided by the level of space. However, everyone's pace was getting slower and slower. The pressure here was too terrifying. It was unknown how many third-step Empyreans had died, but their souls, flesh and blood had formed the core, giving birth to an Empyrean symbol. How could it be so easy to approach? Starting from the level of strength, everyone stopped in their tracks. Geng Xiandan stopped, Shi Zhanghe stopped, Shi Mingyu stopped, and the Empress stopped. As strong as the Empress was, there was nothing she could do. After all, she only had the power of the second step, so it was impossible for her to oppose a third-step Heaven Venerable. Only Ling Han and Zhuang Fairway were left. They advanced with difficulty, and they still had to fight, so their speed was even slower. Can they reach the end in the end? And who can beat them to it? Ling Han and Zhuang Fairway were engaged in an intense battle. They had already gone deeper and deeper underground, and a sea of blood appeared in front of them. At the bottom of the sea of blood, there was a golden symbol that was glowing. However, it was pressed down by a large rock, so only about half of it could be seen. Kill. Ling Han and Zhuang Fairway's battle was intense. They both used all their techniques, wanting to send the other flying, so that they could obtain this Empyrean symbol for themselves. Now it was actually not about which one of them was stronger, but rather about luck. The space that was closest to the Empyrean symbol was at the second or the fourth layer. The two of them charged. They both knew that whoever could flip over the large rock, then the Empyrean symbol would appear. But similarly, it would immediately disappear from the world. Only one person could obtain this symbol, and that was the first person to flip over the rock. They were close, they had arrived. They had already arrived at the side of the large rock, and Zhuang Fairway's expression immediately changed. Fuck. This was actually the space of the second layer. Pung! He hadn't even finished his thought when he was sent flying by a kick from Ling Han. He let out a long howl that was filled with unwillingness. Why? Ling Han decisively flipped over the large rock. This symbol was already starting to shatter, and it wouldn't be long before it disappeared. He had to be decisive, and not waste any time. Bringing the Empress and the others along to observe was completely unrealistic. Hong! Endless golden light blazed, and rushed towards the top of Ling Han's head, and then disappeared. Xiao. The light continuously flickered, and it was only an instant before the symbol disappeared, and so did the golden light. Ling Han immediately felt a terrifying corrosive attack, and hurriedly soared into the sky. Pung! He broke through the ground, and saw that his body was covered with wounds. His skin had corroded, and they were still continuously expanding. Ling Han hurriedly channeled the indestructible heavens scroll to resist, and the corrosion immediately stopped. But as long as he stopped channeling the indestructible heavens scroll, the corrosion would continue, so he could not be careless at all. The Empress and the others hurriedly surrounded him, asking about his situation. I'm fine. Ling Han nodded. He had only suffered the corrosion of a third-step Empyrean, and as long as he was given some time, he would definitely be able to dispel it. Pung! Zhuang Fairway also charged out of the ground. He was not much better off, and his body was covered with rotting holes. He glared hatefully at Ling Han. The Empyrean symbol had already been obtained by Ling Han, and unless he could refine it alive, there was no way he could obtain it. But now, everyone was fighting against the frenzy, so who would dare to risk universal condemnation? Humph! He flicked his sleeves, and charged towards the other end of the crack in the ground. Since he could not obtain the Empyrean symbol, then he would go and kill all the outsiders to vent his anger. Ling Han did not move. He believed that Zhuang Fairway could not do it, because the latter had also been corroded by the Empyrean power in the Blood Sea, and would need to expend a great deal of power to suppress it. In this way, if he could still defeat over 100 third-step Empyreans, then Ling Han really did not believe it. Let's go back, Ling Han said. This time he could be said to have gained a lot. The Empyrean symbol. Even a sixth-step Empyrean would be moved, and even a seventh-step Empyrean would be interested. One more would mean one more battle prowess, so why not? The Empress took Ling Han into the Immortal Indulgence residence. Ling Han's current state was not suitable for battle, and it was better to rest and recuperate. With the Empress, the heavenly venerable Fate-born, and other powerful characters opening the way, the group successfully left the Black Waterfall Mountains and returned to the true second level. In this place, the Empress' battle prowess could be said to be at the peak, and she did not fear any provocation. After returning to the camp, Ling Han concentrated on recuperating his body. There was too much third-step Empyrean power and resentment in his body, and he needed to eliminate them bit by bit. Thus, it took almost 100 years for Ling Han to finally recover completely. When he came out of seclusion, the Empress told him about the recent events. The most sensational news was, of course, that he had obtained a complete Empyrean symbol. This was something even a sixth-step Empyrean would be jealous of. Who knew when Ling Han would leave the extraterrestrial battlefield and disappear forever, captured by a powerhouse to refine an Empyrean symbol? Of course, it was definitely not just Ling Han who had obtained an Empyrean symbol, but no one would say such a thing. Who would make it known to the whole world like Ling Han? The second was the return of Zhuang Feiwei. He was the most talented genius of the fourth level in the past. And now, not only was he not dead, but he had also advanced to the fourth step. This was great news, and it was said that even a seventh-step Empyrean was alarmed, and an order was issued to praise Zhuang Feiwei. Chapter 2802. Ling Han didn't take action after applying for leave. He was too big a target now. First, he had offended many people, such as He Kun and Zhuang Feiwei, who definitely wanted to kill him. In the second level, they were no match for Ling Han, so they would definitely wait for Ling Han to leave the extraterritorial battlefield, and then wait for an opportunity to attack. Although Ling Han's battle prowess was nature-defying, it was limited by his cultivation level. He definitely couldn't beat a fourth-step celestial venerable, not to mention that Zhuang Feiwei was a super genius. Under normal circumstances, his battle prowess would probably be close to the fifth step. He definitely couldn't keep his leave a secret, and those who had ill intentions towards him must have already received the news. Ling Han waited. Anyway, he had 100 million years of leave, so he deliberately took such a long time. Of course, it was because the thing he wanted to get was a little difficult to obtain, and he also wanted to deliberately mislead them. Time passed slowly, and Ling Han still didn't take action. He just accompanied his wife, and he would often talk to the queen's belly and the child. After a few thousand years, the frenzied army launched an extremely fierce attack. This was a super war that only happened once in 100 million years. The number of frenzied army that attacked was shocking. Even with a super elite like Ling Han overseeing, they still couldn't defend the camp, and had to retreat. Ling Han didn't let the queen participate in the war. Although she was strong, she was pregnant with the child of the old Ling family. Ling Han didn't want his child to die in his mother's belly. However, when the war ended, Ling Han suddenly disappeared. He deliberately used this chaos as a cover, and no one knew when he left. When Zhuang Feiwei and the others found out, although they chased after him, it was too late. How could they catch Ling Han? As soon as Ling Han left the extraterritorial battlefield, he started to travel through space. This was an ability that no one else knew about. The plane power in his body was a coordinate that could resonate with the corresponding plane. This allowed him to find the right path when traveling through the origin world, so he wouldn't get lost. Even the Empress couldn't do this, because she had fused the power of the realm into a single core. She was no longer an independent entity, so naturally, she didn't have the characteristics of a single realm, and couldn't be used as a lighthouse. A few decades later, Ling Han arrived at a low-level plane. A dimensional war was still going on here, but Ling Han had persuaded them once before. Thus many heavenly venerables had already given up, but there were still some heavenly venerables who were unwilling, and were still fighting. Of course, Ling Han didn't come here to settle scores, because the two great planes here had an intense collision, and it was extremely possible that a supreme treasure would appear. Something that could make all the celestial kings go crazy. Planar core, of course. Ling Han wouldn't directly pluck away the core of a real plane. That would cause the destruction of billions of lives. Although Ling Han wanted his children to win at the starting line, he wouldn't disregard and ignore lives. Otherwise, how would he be any different from madness? However, this place was very similar to the two-realm battlefield of the celestial realm and the foreign realm. The two great worlds collided, creating a new world. This was still evolving, and in the future, it might produce new life and develop into a new world. But now it was still far from that. What Ling Han wanted was this newly formed world core, just like the one he had obtained before. How to obtain the core was a very simple matter. The difficult part was how to give this core to his children. Only the person who first obtained the planar core could become the master of the plane. After the transfer, the planar core could only be used to analyze the power of heaven and earth. Could he destroy this new world in one fell swoop? This was why Ling Han had to take such a long leave. Otherwise, how long would it take to pluck the planar core? It was too easy for him to travel through the origin world now, and he might not even be as good as a seventh-step Empyrean. It was just that the foreign realm battlefield was a bit special, and he couldn't use it. Ling Han studied it carefully. After a few hundred years, he had an idea and put it into practice. He began to dig out this world from the point where the two worlds collided. He had to be careful because this was like snatching food from a tiger's mouth. Even if the two lower planes weren't as strong as him, they still wouldn't let him do as he pleased. This was equivalent to starting a planar war, and it involved a battle for territory. Hence, Ling Han had to suppress both worlds. He couldn't let this new world be destroyed in such a collision. This required Ling Han to put in a lot of effort. Every step had to be controlled with incomparable precision. Time continued to flow by, and very quickly, 10 million years had passed. Ling Han finally broke into a smile. He spread open his body, and directly enveloped a vast expanse of heaven and earth. This was the new world. If he dug it out and left it there, then the spiritual chi of this world would quickly dry up and turn into scorched earth. After all, this wasn't a true plane, and could only be said to be a small world. But after being collected by Ling Han, things were different. Ling Han had infinite planar power within his body. He could be considered a miniature origin world. Then, why couldn't he use the origin world to nourish a small plane? In the future, this world wouldn't belong to any plane. As long as it wasn't destroyed by powerhouses, it could exist for a very, very long time. Long enough for his child to be the ruler of the plane for many years. Wouldn't it be easy for him to break through to the Empyrean realm? This was undoubtedly troublesome, but for Ling Han, what was wrong with spending so much effort to pave the way for his child? Moreover, was he the only one who would think of this? Ling Han couldn't help but think that Lin Yulian, Xi and Chihu, and the other young powerhouses could advance so quickly. Was it because they had obtained a plane core from a young age, and were exposed to planar power every day? Was this how they could become fourth-step Empyreans in a short billion years? This was very suspicious. Ling Han's advancement speed wasn't slow, but unless he grasped more than 30 Empyrean symbols, it would be impossible for him to reach the fourth step in a billion years. Thus, he lost at the starting line. It was fine. Advancing quickly didn't mean that one's future would definitely crush others. No matter whether it was Xi and Chihu, Lin Yulian, or Wu Haoyang, they were all stuck at the fourth step. They hadn't advanced 5 steps in an epoch, giving others enough time to catch up. Ling Han believed that his body contained countless planar power, and his body could be considered another origin world. There definitely wouldn't be any bottlenecks in reaching the 7th step. He began to return. He left silently, and his return was also very sudden. No one expected that he would suddenly return to the 2nd level. He first went to cancel his leave, and then returned to accompany his wife. The Empress's lower abdomen already had a clear bulge. In terms of pregnancy, she looked like she was only 3 or 4 months pregnant, and was still far from giving birth. Ling Han wasn't in a hurry. After this child was born, he would grow up too quickly. In the blink of an eye, he was already an adult. He would either marry a wife or get married and build his own family. Thus, he treasured this period of time very much. There were almost no battles on the 2nd level recently. It was said that Frenzy was concentrating on attacking the 6th level, giving all the production capacity to the 5th step Empyreans. Thus the pressure on the other levels was less. This wasn't good news. Chapter 2803. Now the fifth step heavenly venerables of the sixth level could no longer stop the frenzy army. Many sixth step heavenly venerables had rushed to the sixth level to support, and the battle had reached a climax. On the Flamefrost Plains side, more than a dozen fifth step heavenly venerables had died, and even one sixth step heavenly venerables had fallen. This was a huge loss. This was very bad. Although they could still hold on now, if the frenzy army suddenly changed their direction of attack, such as the seventh level, then a large number of sixth step heavenly venerables would run to the sixth level to support, and the defense line there would instantly fall. Even if they could kill all of the frenzy army, a lost defense line was lost, and it could never be regained. How far would they be pushed by the frenzy army? It wasn't that such things had never happened before in history. Every time, it was a huge headache for the Flamefrost Plain. If they weren't careful, they would lose a large amount of territory. This time, no one knew what the result would be. Ling Han couldn't help, either, so he could only focus on accompanying his wife and waiting for the birth of the child. Very soon 60 million years had passed, and the Empress was finally about to give birth. Ling Han was so anxious that he paced in circles at the door. Pregnancy was calculated in hundreds of millions of years, so this child naturally couldn't be born overnight. After a whole 7 days, this little child was finally willing to be born. It was a girl. Although she had just been born, she already had a beautiful outline and looked like an empress. Ling Han held his first daughter and couldn't help but smile like a flower. Beautiful, this was his daughter. The Rain Emperor and the others came upon hearing the news. When they saw Ling Han holding the newborn child, they all congratulated him. What a beautiful little girl. Why don't I be the matchmaker and betroth her to Zhou Heng's grandson? The black donkey said as he poked his head over. Ling Han almost kicked him. This daughter has just been born, and you already have designs on her? No, no matter how outstanding she is, I won't marry her. Everyone presented their greeting gifts. There were countless Celestial King medicines and Celestial metal. Ling Han didn't stand on ceremony, and accepted them all with a smile. Brother Ling, your daughter seems to be extraordinary, Ji Wuming said. His aura was becoming more and more stable, and he was not far from breaking through to the second step. Ling Han chuckled, hugging his daughter like a treasure, not even letting others touch her. He was very clear that this precious daughter of his was born as a first heavenly layer immortal king. How could she not be extraordinary? It couldn't be helped. His parents were both Empyreans, and they had condensed the power of countless planes. Such a child was blessed by the heavens the moment he was born, far surpassing the descendants of ordinary Empyreans. He extracted the small world within his body and fused the planar core into his daughter's body. As long as his daughter was in this small world, she would have the strength of a quasi-Empyrean. Awesome, his limelight was too great. Even though it wasn't suitable to hold any celebratory activities in the foreign battleground, there were still many people who came after hearing the news. Everyone brought gifts of considerable value. There were some gifts that Ling Han accepted, and some that he didn't. Of course, he couldn't accept this favor for free. Right at this moment, something big happened. This was truly a major event that no one had expected. Boom! The heavens fell and the earth cracked. The power of the plains surged, capable of annihilating everything. Not good. Ling Han's expression changed. He had originally wanted to go check on the situation, but now he didn't hesitate at all. He put all the women into the celestial visitor house, and then broke into a run. In the distance, a terrifying energy storm was sweeping over. It was just like when the small world between the immortal realm and the foreign dimension had exploded. This was an energy storm formed after the collision of two super high-level planes. It attacked with unstoppable momentum, not to mention a single step. Even a sixth-step Empyrean wouldn't dare to take it head-on. Xiao xiao xiao. One figure after another appeared around Ling Han, and joined the frenzied group with him. Fortunately, although the energy storm was terrifying, its speed couldn't catch up to a Empyrean's. After running several million miles in one go, everyone finally stopped. They had now completely retreated from the foreign battleground. What was going on? Before they could figure out what was going on, they saw Xiao xiao xiao. More people broke through space and appeared. However, they weren't the Empyreans of the second level, but powerhouses of various levels. Second step, third step, fourth step, fifth step, sixth step. All the powerhouses had retreated from the foreign battleground, except for the seventh step. Everyone was even more curious. What was going on? Zhou Heng, Chu Hao, and Lin Xiaoyang were all there. There were also several sixth-step Empyreans. They were the leaders of the entire place, and they stood in the center of the crowd, exuding an overbearing aura that suppressed everything. No one dared to disrespect them. Ling Han counted. There were more than 200 sixth-step Empyreans, close to 300. On average, there were about 2 or 3 high-level Empyreans in each dimension. The sixth-step Empyreans all frowned slightly. Very quickly, they revealed expressions of listening attentively. Not long after, they revealed looks of astonishment. Lin Xiaoyang said, "This Empyrean just received a divine sense transmission from several lords in the 8th level. They said that the fierce battle had caused turbulence and collision between the two dimensions. Now an energy storm has formed here. Apart from a 7th-step Empyrean, no one can stand here." Everyone nodded. So that was what was going on. Wait a minute. Everyone suddenly reacted. Under the raging energy storm, only a 7th-step Empyrean could stand here. Didn't this mean that? That's right. Chu Hao nodded. The energy storm this time is incomparably turbulent. It may never disappear. This means that we don't have a mission for the time being. And we don't need to fight here anymore. We can go wherever we want. This, although everyone had already thought of this, when this news was confirmed, they were somewhat unable to adapt to it. For countless years, they had fought here and grown here. They had long regarded this place as their home. Now they were suddenly told that their home was gone, and they didn't need to stay here anymore. This made them feel at a loss as to what to do. However, in just an instant, many of them had already figured out what they wanted to do. They wanted to return to their own dimensions and become the unrivaled overlord. Zhou Heng said, "Everyone can go wherever you want. If the energy storm shows signs of disappearing, I will inform you one by one and then come back to fight." Everyone nodded. However, after fighting for so long, how could they disperse just because they said so? Everyone didn't leave immediately. Instead, they planned to investigate the situation. Ling Han, on the other hand, looked for an opportunity to meet Zhou Heng. Coincidentally, Lin Xiaoyang and Chu Hao were also there, so they went to meet Ling Han together. "Kid, you're not bad," Chu Hao said with a smile. He had originally concluded that Ling Han could only give up his original plan and walk the path of an ordinary Empyrean. He didn't expect Ling Han to give him a surprise. "Thank you, seniors." Ling Han bowed slightly. "May I ask the 3 seniors, what do you think of this incident?" "You suspect that this is a conspiracy of madness." Zhou Heng voiced out Ling Han's suspicion. He pondered for a moment. It's not that such an incident has never happened before in the long history. However, none of the energy storms were as violent as this one. I can be sure that this is not fake. All the 7th-step Empyreans have also confirmed this. Chapter 2804. An energy frenzy suddenly appeared in the 2 realms, and even a 6th-step heavenly venerable couldn't step in. This matter was too important. Ling Han shamelessly asked the 3 6th-step heavenly venerables if this was a conspiracy created by madness. Zhou Heng and the others also analyzed and pondered in detail, but didn't find anything strange about this matter. The energy frenzy couldn't deceive anyone. Not only did the 6th-step heavenly venerables test it, but even the 7th-step heavenly venerables personally confirmed it. From now on, only the 7th-step heavenly venerables could directly fight with madness here. And whether it was the 6th-step heavenly venerables or madness's creations, they couldn't enter here anymore. In other words, in the future, it would be the 7th-step heavenly venerables fighting madness directly, and no one else could. Such a situation has happened before, but the energy frenzy only lasted for a few 100 million years at most, and wasn't as terrifying as this time, Chu Hao said. At first glance, there was nothing wrong, but this time, the conflict between the 2 realms was too fierce, causing the energy frenzy to not only be able to step in, but also lasted for almost an eternity. The origin world was at peace. Not only Ling Han and the others, but the other heavenly venerables were also analyzing and thinking. But no matter how hard they thought, they didn't think this was a conspiracy of madness. Perhaps the days of peace were really coming. Of course, the premise was that those seventh-step heavenly venerables could stop madness, or madness itself would be the greatest disaster. Ling Han left, and the next step was naturally to consider where to go. With his and the Empress's path of cultivation, it didn't matter where they cultivated before the second step. The main thing was to strengthen themselves, and it was the same no matter which plane they cultivated in. Thus, they could run all over the origin world now, go sightseeing, and enjoy the rare days of peace. However, if he stayed here, he would be able to increase his cultivation speed no matter what. After all, this was the only super high-level existential plane. Moreover, Ling Han had already brought his relatives here, so there was no reason for him to return to the celestial realm. Ling Han decided to live in seclusion for a period of time and watch his daughter grow up. This was his greatest wish now. Of course, the girls would not object, so Ling Han returned to the place where his parents lived and began his life of seclusion. When Ling Dongxing and his wife learned that Ling Han gave birth to a precious daughter, they were also happy for him. They even doted on the girl more than he did. They held her in their arms all day long and were reluctant to put her down. Then there was an extremely important matter. Give this girl a name. Ling Han was directly deprived of the right to name things. What kind of names were those birds and beasts that followed him? If this guy were to give them names, he would probably be cursed by the little girl in the future. This caused Ling Han to feel quite depressed, and he dragged the large black dog out to drink. He got it drunk for a few days. After some discussion, they decided to name the little girl Ling Shi. Ling Han was not very happy at first, but after thinking about it, a name was just a code name. It did not matter whether he gave it or not. For example, if he was happy, he could give his daughter a nickname like Baby or something. He put down everything and stayed by his daughter's side. At the same time, he continued to work hard, hoping to have more children. But this kind of thing really could not be rushed. Ling Shi grew up very slowly. Other people would grow up to be a big girl in 10 or so years. But after 10 or so years, she still didn't look much different from when she was born. She was still drinking milk and didn't know how to speak. She could only cry out. Ling Han couldn't help but sweat. We didn't give birth to a silly girl, did we? In the end, not only did all the girls roll their eyes at him, but even Ling Dongxing and his wife slapped his head a few times. How could he say that about his own daughter? This was also because Ling Han was too impatient. Although he did not want his daughter to grow up so quickly, she had hardly grown up in more than 10 years, which naturally made him a little anxious. It was too slow. However, Ling Shi was still growing up slowly. After 30 years, she finally learned how to speak, and was extremely cute. After more than 100 years, she had grown into the appearance of a 3- or 4-year-old child, and was even more lovely and moving like a fairy. Everyone in the Ling clan loved this little princess dearly. Even Zhou Heng and Chu Hao had come once. When they saw the little girl, they immediately wanted to arrange a marriage for their own grandson, but were rejected by Ling Han, who refused to be persuaded by force or persuasion. Different from Ling Jianshui when he was young, Ling Shi was obedient and shockingly quiet. She had the demeanor of a young lady from a noble family since she was young, and everyone praised her for being a good wife and loving mother in the future. This made Ling Han jealous, and he really wanted to strangle this damn brat who was going to steal his daughter in the future. He lived in seclusion here, but there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. Moreover, wherever he was, it was a holy land. This small place also gradually developed and became famous. The embryonic form of a city appeared, and after everyone's discussion, this place was named Ling City again. Feng Piyun, Mu Rongqing, and the Rain Emperor all went out to travel one after another. But as long as Ling Han kept watch, what else was there to worry about? Ling Shi's progress in martial art was frighteningly fast. Under Ling Han's nurturing, Celestial King Tier medicine was definitely something she could eat freely, and added with the help of the existential core to help her comprehend Tao, and also having Vale come over to be her teacher, The little girl very quickly advanced into the second heaven, and her foundation was incredibly solid. 300 years passed, and the little girl looked like she was 7 or 8 years old. Everyone was discussing whether they should send Ling Shi to the #1 martial arts academy in the world. Ling Han was naturally firmly against it. Wouldn't it be better if she had him to teach her? There was no need to go to some martial arts academy. Therefore, this matter was put on hold for the time being. Time flew, and another 1,000 years passed. Ling Shi finally looked like she was 12 or 13 years old. Her temperament became more and more tranquil, and her appearance became more and more like the Empress. But her style was completely different from the Empress. The Empress was cold and graceful, while she was amiable and approachable, not putting on any airs at all. One day, Ling Shi suddenly suggested to Ling Han that she wanted to go to the #1 martial arts academy in the world to cultivate. She gave a lot of reasons, the biggest one being that Ling Han had not only entered the martial arts academy when he was at the third heaven, but had also cultivated in the cemetery of the Celestial King. She wanted to walk the same path as her father. Though the little girl was tranquil and gentle, Ling Han knew that her bones were the same as his, and her personality was incredibly stubborn. Once she had already made up her mind on something, no one could change her mind. Ling Han could only agree. After all, there was not much danger in the martial arts academy. However, how could the crazy demon who loved his daughter rest assured? After letting his daughter take a breather, Ling Han went to the low-level plane and dug out that small world. After refining it with his great power, he placed it into Ling Shi's body. In this way, Ling Shi only had to draw out the power of the small world, and she would be able to possess the power of a pseudo-heavenly venerable. This should be enough, right? Ling Han was still not at ease, and decided to refine a few more treasures for his daughter. As a result, he was grumbled by all the girls. Thankfully, Ling Shi did not have a mischievous personality. Otherwise, if this little girl went to the martial arts academy, wouldn't that be tearing down the entire academy? Only then did Ling Han give up resentfully and send his daughter to the #1 martial arts academy in the world. He also knew that he had caused quite a bit of trouble in the past, so he did not expose his identity. After sending his daughter to the martial arts academy, he even deliberately stayed outside for a few months, and only returned to Ling City after confirming that his daughter could adapt to the life here. However, something had happened to Ling City. Chapter 2806. You. Ling Han shook his head. It's not that I don't respect you, but you really don't deserve to be my enemy. Ling Han. He Yufeng gritted his teeth. He had been so domineering at that time, suppressing Ling Han with a single move. If it weren't for Lin Piaoxue, this guy would have been dead long ago, and wouldn't have had the right to be arrogant now. The Empress stood out. I'll kill you. He Yufeng was so angry that his nose almost became crooked. Why were the people around Ling Han so arrogant? A first-step celestial venerable wanted to suppress him? He snorted and said, Fine, when I suppress you, I'll see what expression this guy has. The Empress's appearance made his heart beat faster. So how painful would he be if he killed the Empress in front of Ling Han? This was a good idea. Ling Han, my young master is going to suppress you. Behind him, those who had abandoned their integrity and rebelled shouted, waving the flag for He Yufeng while mocking Ling Han. Ling Han's eyes sharpened, and wherever his gaze swept, these people all lost their voices. When a celestial venerable was angry, heaven and earth moved. Who dared to clamor? Why aren't you speaking? He Kun asked calmly. He even turned around and glanced, instantly making those people's hearts beat like drums. They could only brace themselves and start cursing again. He Kun stroked his beard and smiled. Previously, he had been cursed very badly by Ling Han, but he respected his status, so he naturally disdained to personally curse. The Empress leaped out, charging towards He Yufeng. Hung. The two celestial venerables immediately started a fierce battle. After a few moves, He Yufeng's expression changed. The Empress's strength far exceeded his expectations. Not only was she not easily suppressed by him, but her strength was even above his. How was this possible? It was one thing for Ling Han to be freakish, But why were the people around him also so freakish? The Empress's attacks became fiercer and fiercer. She had endured for a month, and now she could finally make a move, exploding out in attack after attack. Ling Han nodded. The Empress had merged the power of 100 planes, and although she was now in the middle stage of first step, her battle prowess was in the middle stage of second step, which was a whole cultivation level. And He Yufeng? Although he was a second step heavenly venerable, he was only in the early stage of the second step. His battle prowess was also in line with his cultivation level, and was obviously inferior to the Empress. Thus, He Yufeng was immediately suppressed by the Empress. He Yufeng was also aware of this point, but he wasn't too worried, because combat strength wasn't solely determined by strength. There were also Empyrean precious techniques, symbols, and precious artifacts. Wang, he drew out a sword, and there were 7 symbols on it that were glowing. He had already awakened the power of a heavenly venerate tier, and then added the heavenly venerate technique and symbols, and blasted it towards the Empress. The Empress didn't have a heavenly venerable tier treasure, so she was at a disadvantage in this aspect. She avoided the sharp edge of the treasured sword, and continued to move about. Then she struck out with her jade-like palm. She also channeled the 9 transformations heaven scroll, and added another heavenly venerable symbol. Her battle prowess instantly skyrocketed. In terms of pure power, the Empress was naturally stronger, but He Yufeng had a heavenly venerable tier treasure in hand, so she was not at a disadvantage, and could completely make up for the difference in power. The two of them were fighting fiercely, but the victor would not be decided in a short period of time. However, it seemed like they were evenly matched, but everyone knew that He Yufeng had already lost, and not by just a little bit. 2 steps against 1, even using a heavenly venerable tier treasure, and it was actually only a tie. Were you not embarrassed? He Yufeng's face was flushed red. He was angry, furious, and embarrassed. Even the person by Ling Han's side could actually defeat the stronger one as the weaker one. She was a minor level lower, and yet she was still able to stand against him. This was really too unreasonable. Enough! He Kun shouted darkly. He didn't want his son to continue suffering such a setback. Otherwise, it wouldn't be encouraging his son at all, but rather a blow to his confidence, making him doubt his life. He Yufeng attacked a few more times, and finally stopped unwillingly retreating. Ling Han shook his head. My wife beat you with only 1 step of cultivation, and she almost abused you like a dog. So, trash like you had better be more obedient, and don't come out and make a fool of yourself. He Yufeng's eyes were spitting fire, but he didn't open his mouth to refute, because the truth was indeed so. Ling Han crooked his finger at He Kun. Old man, now it's your turn. He Kun smirked coldly. No matter how eloquent you are, in front of absolute power, you can only die with a grudge. Ling Han laughed loudly. Who was beaten like a dead dog by me before? If it weren't for the fact that you ran quite fast, the grass on your grave would probably already be a field of grass by now. He Kun's gaze sharpened. Previously, he had been defeated by Ling Han, and it was in front of everyone's eyes. This was a humiliation that he couldn't wash away. He humphed. Today, I will fulfill what I said before, and raise Ling City to the ground. He moved. Hong! A terrifying power concentrated, forming a monstrous giant hand that pressed towards Ling City. With the power of a 4th step heavenly venerable, if this blow swept past, Ling City would definitely be destroyed forever. Ling Han also moved. He directly drew out the divine demon sword, and slashed towards the sky. Shwa! That giant hand was instantly split in the middle, and slashed towards the 2 sides. Pung! The earth shook. These 2 blasts of power blasted towards the east and west sides outside the city, giving rise to a strong earthquake. Ling Han brandished his sword and charged towards He Kun. He couldn't allow He Kun to act so wantonly anymore. Otherwise, if he was the slightest bit careless, Ling City would be reduced to ruins. You're seeking death, He Kun said coldly. He naturally wouldn't be afraid of battle, and began to exchange blows with Ling Han. He didn't care about the lives of the people around him, and directly unleashed his full power. It should be known that there were a great many people who had abandoned their chastity behind him. Now with a single shock from the power that he had unleashed, 99% of them had been turned into dust. Only 4 or 5 people were lucky enough to survive, but they were also heavily injured and not far from death. There wasn't a single one of them who didn't regret it. If they had known this would happen, they wouldn't have joined in the fun. In the end, they had even lost their lives. Ling Han and He Kun battled. He immediately used his full power, channeling his heavenly venerable symbol, 9 transformations heaven scroll, 5-element lightning technique, and so on. However, there was a power gap of a major tier between them, and the difference in battle prowess between him and He Kun was really too great. The other only needed to casually move, and Ling Han was completely suppressed. Just one step, He Kun said disdainfully. However, he didn't know how shocked he was in his heart. A first step heavenly venerable could be fierce to such an extent, making him envious, jealous, and hateful. However, this would eventually become history. As long as he killed this monster, he would be able to eliminate all future troubles. Ling Han! A delicate voice suddenly rang out. Niu is back. It was Hu Niu. Fellow Taoist, he listened to me. How about you stop? A woman's voice also rang out. Though it wasn't loud, it was filled with intimidating power. He Kun couldn't help but be startled. He frowned and turned his head. A beautiful woman in palace attire was standing nearby. She held a horsetail whisk in her hand and exuded an air of otherworldliness. Fellow Taoist by Chiu. He Kun nodded at her. This was a 4th step heavenly venerable, and her strength was not inferior to his, so he naturally couldn't treat her lightly. However, he naturally couldn't just stop like this. This matter has nothing to do with fellow Taoist, so please don't interfere. Heavenly Venerable by Chiu shook his head. This person is the husband of this venerable's disciple, so this venerable has to take care of him. Chapter 2807. He Kun's gaze shifted, and her attitude softened as she said, For fellow's sake, I can take a step back. As long as this boy kneels and apologizes to me, I can spare him this once. Fellow monk by Chiu gave an "oh," and said, How did this boy offend fellow? He Kun's expression couldn't help but turn ugly. Did he have the nerve to repeat the scandal of his crushing defeat at the hands of Ling Han in front of the heavenly venerable by Chiu? He shook his head and said, Fellow doesn't need to know the specifics. As long as this boy is willing to lower his head to me, I am not a petty person. The heavenly venerable by Chiu nodded slowly. Ling Han was only a 1st step heavenly venerable, so what if he lowered his head to a 4th step elite? There was no harm at all. She turned to Ling Han and said, Since fellow he has said so, Junior, kneel and kowtow to fellow he. Ling Han was talking to Hu Niu. The two of them hadn't seen each other for more than an epoch, so they naturally had many things to talk about. The little girl had long since become a heavenly venerable, and had even reached the 2nd step, but she didn't condense a great deal of the power of the plane like the Empress, and instead walked the path of an ordinary heavenly venerable. This was also why she could lead in cultivation level. For Ling Han and the Empress to advance further, the time needed was shockingly long. This was the price that had to be paid for being strong at the same cultivation level. The little girl was a talkative person in the first place, and added with the fact that they hadn't seen each other for so long, she chattered incessantly, and was extremely talkative. Meanwhile, Ling Han listened happily. Now, just looking at the little girl, and listening to her speak filled him with happiness. Niu almost died a few times. Woo woo woo, you stinky guy, you don't even stay by Niu's side. The little girl squeezed into Ling Han's arms as she scolded him, acting coquettishly. The two of them were whispering to each other, and didn't notice the words of the heavenly venerable by Chiu at all. The heavenly venerable by Chiu couldn't help but look displeased. I'm standing up for you out of goodwill, and what's this attitude of yours? She coughed heavily, and released the power of a heavenly venerable. Ling Han and Hu Niu were finally roused. Hu Niu was very displeased and said, Old nun, isn't Niu talking to Ling Han? She had never taken Empyrean Bhikkhu as her master. Her attitude had always been like this, so it could not be considered disobedience. Celestial Venerable Bichiu had long been accustomed to her appearance. It was precisely because of this little girl's pure and clear mind that she was able to make such great progress in her cultivation. Otherwise, with her talent, she would only be able to reach this step at most. She was unhappy with Ling Han, so she said in a deep voice, "Brat, I want you to kowtow and apologize to fellow Taoist he." "No." Before Ling Han could express himself, Hunyao jumped up first. She knew Ling Han too well, and there was no way he would suffer such great humiliation. The Empress also said menacingly, "Old nun, you've gone too far." Heavenly Venerable Bai Chio's face twitched. Though the old nun's Taoist title was Bhikkhu, it was not the slightest bit related to Buddhism. She actually dared to call her old nun Hunyao, and that was one thing. But how could this woman do the same? She was a fourth step Heavenly Venerable. So how could a first step Heavenly Venerable dare to be so disrespectful to her? "How dare you?" She glared, and endless murderous aura flowed out. Ling Han waved his hand and said, "Senior, Junior is grateful that you can stand up for Junior. However, Junior will definitely not lower his head to this kind of old beast that bullies the weak." These words admittedly made Heavenly Venerable Bai Chio displeased, and also made He Lakun so angry that his mouth twisted. However, this was also what he wanted. He Lakun could be said to already know Ling Han's bad temper like the back of his hand, and knew that it was impossible for him to lower his head to him. Thus he deliberately took a step back. In this way, it would become Ling Han who didn't know what was good for him, and had the nerve to stand up for Heavenly Venerable Bai Chio. "Brat, you've gone too far," Heavenly Venerable Bai Chio said in displeasure. In the first place, she was already dissatisfied with Hunyao's affection for Ling Han, and thought that Ling Han was not worthy of her. Secondly, cultivators should also put all their energy into cultivation. So how could they be so reluctant to part with personal feelings? Ling Han smiled calmly. "Forgive me for not being able to comply with Senior's order. This matter, Senior does not need to concern yourself with." Heavenly Venerable Bai Chio's brows twitched in anger. A mere first step Heavenly Venerable dared to be so arrogant? He was certain that she would definitely block He Lakun for him for Hunyao. It was good that Ling Han died. That way, Hunyao would not have to be head over heels for such a stinky man. She waved her hand. "All right. I will not concern myself with your matter." He Lakun couldn't help but reveal a smug smile. From the first step of his concession, he had already dug a trap for Heavenly Venerable Bai Chio, and was certain that Ling Han was someone who refused to give in. He took a step forward. "Ling Han, I have already given you a chance, but you did not grasp it. Too stupid." Ling Han shook his head. "He Lakun, do you think you have a chance of victory?" He Lakun smirked coldly. "I do not believe that you can still turn things around in this kind of situation." "Then bring it on, and see how I kill you," Ling Han said calmly. "I would like to see how you kill me." He Lakun strode towards Ling Han. With another fourth step Heavenly Venerable present, he definitely had to kill Ling Han with the force of a thunderbolt to avoid future troubles. Today Ling Han had to die. Ling Han smiled, and took out the communication talisman that Chu Hao gave him. His divine sense locked onto He Lakun, and then he threw the communication talisman at He Lakun. Instantly, the communication talisman lit up, and overflowed with an extremely powerful aura. The light condensed, and turned into a fist that then blasted towards He Lakun. He Lakun turned pale with fright. This attack was too terrifying. The aura that flowed out was definitely not that of a fourth step, but a fifth step. No, it might even be a sixth step. He could not block this attack, and was not even qualified to block it. He could only escape. He hurriedly turned and ran, fearing that he would be consigned to eternal damnation if he was any slower. However, this was Chu Hao's handiwork, which was equivalent to a sixth step Heavenly Venerable's attack. Although it only had the power of a fifth step, it was not something that a fourth step Heavenly Venerable could resist. Boom! The terrifying power surged, and this fist had already smashed onto He Lakun's body. Instantly He Lakun was torn into pieces. In front of the power of a fifth step Heavenly Venerable, a fourth step Heavenly Venerable was nothing. Why were Lin Yulian and the other two heaven-defying geniuses stuck at the fourth step for so long? Of course, it was because they had started with too much momentum, and it was inevitable that they would slow down to accumulate their strength. At the same time, it was also because the difference between a fifth step and a fourth step, Heavenly Venerable, was too big. So what if he stood out in the crowd? With one attack he was reduced to ashes. Heavenly Venerable Bai Chio's eyes were wide open. She knew her own limits. If this attack had landed on her, she would definitely end up the same as He Kun, dead as dead could be. A dignified fourth step Heavenly Venerable died just like that. Who could have imagined this outcome? Everyone was dumbfounded. And He Yufeng was even more dumbfounded. Her own father died just like that. He Yufeng, it's your turn. Ling Han strode forward. He had to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. He was not an indecisive person. If he let He Yufeng escape this time, heaven knew how much trouble a second step, Heavenly Venerable, could cause. He Yufeng gritted his teeth and suddenly turned to run. One empress was enough to fight him to a draw, and with Ling Han and Hunyao added on, he did not think he had any chance of winning. And this was under the condition that Heavenly Venerable Bai Chio did not make a move. Ling Han shook his head and stretched out his right hand, which turned into a monstrous hand that easily suppressed He Yufeng. Chapter 2808. Ling Han said calmly, He Yufeng, honestly speaking, I was the one who started this matter. He Yufeng didn't answer, and only said, kill me if you can, don't be so wishy-washy. As a celestial venerable, she still had this bit of backbone. Ling Han shook his head. Since that's the case, then I'll send you on your way. He pressed his palm down, and He Yufeng was instantly shaken into bloody foam. The strength of the second step couldn't even withstand a single blow. Celestial Venerable Bai Chio's eyes narrowed again. One had to know that Ling Han was at the first step. One step was so fierce, possessing the strength of the third step. No, close to the peak of the third step. She'd misjudged, she'd really misjudged. She'd thought that Ling Han wasn't worthy of Hunyao. But from now on, as long as Ling Han could maintain this momentum, then when he reached the fifth step, the sixth step, would there still be a match for him in the world? Of course, the path of a celestial venerable was extremely difficult, and most celestial venerables could only take one step in an epoch. If Ling Han really wanted to be invincible in the world, it wouldn't be that easy. He might die prematurely on the path of growth. Ling Han withdrew his hand and nodded at Celestial Venerable Bai Chio. Senior, come in and have a seat. Allow Junior to serve tea. Celestial Venerable Bai Chio agreed. She was also very interested in Ling Han and wanted to know how he cultivated to be so powerful. Everyone entered Ling City together. Those who'd abandoned the city before also wanted to follow, but were coldly blocked outside. Ling Han didn't ask for their help, but these people had forgotten Ling Han's previous kindness. When Ling Han was in danger, they ran away, and now that the danger was over, they wanted to come back and lick his boots. Breaking through to the next level still wanted to reconcile. Although Ling Han was only one step, Celestial Venerable Bai Chio didn't dare to underestimate this youngster. He Kun's bones hadn't even turned cold yet, and she didn't want to follow in his footsteps, though she suspected that Ling Han probably wouldn't have such a trump card again. But suspicion was suspicion. Was she going to use her life to test it? Empyrean Bai Chio put down her arrogance. To be able to cultivate to the fourth step, her experience was astonishing. No matter what aspect she talked about, she could talk tirelessly, as if she was pouring endless energy into it. She stayed in Ling City for a few days before leaving alone. Hunyao had already cultivated to the second step, so she did not have much guidance to give this disciple of hers. How high Hunyao could reach in the future would depend on Hunyao's own luck. Though another epoch had passed, Hunyao's personality had not changed in the slightest. When she found out that Ling Han and the Empress had a daughter, she was extremely jealous and cried out every day. Then, she stuck to Ling Han in every possible way, asking Ling Han to give her a baby as well. Time flew by, and a few more years passed. The news of He Kun and his son dying in Ling City slowly spread, shocking many ambitious people. Originally, when the war ended, the previous rule that they could not make a move against their own people naturally did not exist anymore. A great many people were envious of that heavenly venerable tear symbol that Ling Han, had obtained in the Black Waterfall Mountains. However, they were not as fast as Helikun, and were a step late. But being late also had its advantages. Look, they were all extremely glad. If they had been ahead of him, then it would not have been Helikun who would have been killed, but them instead. The problem was, did Ling Han still have such a trump card in his hands? No one dared to rashly try. They had all cultivated to the level of heavenly venerable tier, so who would not cherish their lives? Furthermore, Ling Han's battle prowess had reached the peak stage of the third step, and they would have to use battle prowess of the fourth step to force him to use his trump card. Battle prowess of the fourth step. How many elites like this were there? Which one of them was not an overlord of a region? Would they be willing to sacrifice their lives for someone else and probe Ling Han's actual strength? Thus, even though Ling Han's whereabouts had already been exposed, no one had gone to Ling City to make trouble for him. However, Ling Han knew that this was only temporary. The heavenly venerable tier symbol was too precious, and there would definitely be people who could not resist making a move. However, he did not know who would be the first to come out and eat the crab. Another year passed, and an unwelcome guest came to Ling City. "Junior sister, I have come to find you." A voice boomed out, causing the whole of Ling City to tremble. Junior sister? Which junior sister was it? The Empress immediately flew out. She stood in the sky and asked, "Who is it?" "I am Zhang Kailuan. May I ask if my junior sister Hunyo is here?" A man asked. He was extremely tall and sturdy, and his aura was extremely powerful. The Empress's eyes widened slightly. The pressure this person gave her was about the same as Ling Han's, so his battle prowess should also be about the same, at the level of the third step. She nodded. "Hunyo is indeed here." Zhang Kailuan was very polite and said, "Then please inform her on my behalf." "Big Rock, why are you looking for Nyo?" Hunyo appeared, but she was riding on Ling Han's back. The little girl was now extremely attached to Ling Han, wanting to make up for the separation of this epoch. When Zhang Kailuan saw this, his expression instantly changed. He liked this junior sister. Long ago, when the heavenly venerable Bai Qiu brought Hunyo back, he had liked this weird and mischievous little junior sister at first sight. However, he was focused on cultivation, and was not good at expressing himself. In any case, a heavenly venerable's lifespan was unlimited, so he was not in a hurry. He had never thought that the seclusion this time would be a little long, and the result was that the moment he came out, he heard from the heavenly venerable Bai Qiu that Hunyo was not coming back, and was living a peaceful and happy life with her little lover. Thus, he immediately charged over, wanting to rescue his little junior sister from Ling Han's demonic grasp. "Junior sister, what are you doing?" Zhang Kailuan immediately rebuked. His expression was sour, as if he had caught his wife cheating on him. Ling Han was unhappy. Did his wife need others to tell her what to do? He immediately waved his hand. "I say, are you in a position to criticize?" Who do you think you are?" Zhang Kailuan said disdainfully. Although the heavenly venerable Bai Qiu's words showed that he admired Ling Han very much, he definitely did not believe that a first step heavenly venerable could have battle prowess of a third step. This must be because the heavenly venerable Bai Qiu doted on Hunyo too much, and thus exaggerated. Go, don't worry about unnecessary things." Ling Han waved his hand. A mere first step heavenly venerable dares to be impudent in front of this venerable? Zhang Kailuan was somewhat incredulous. He had never seen such an arrogant first step heavenly venerable. Did he not know that he was a third step, and had already cultivated to the peak of third step, only a little bit away from fourth step? He thought for a moment and understood. Presumably, Ling Han should indeed have some talent, which allowed him to develop such a condescending personality. Then all the more he couldn't ignore it. How could he be at ease to hand over his little sister's junior sister to such a pompous person? "Come, I need to properly teach you a lesson. You need to maintain absolute respect toward elites," he said proudly. He stretched out a hand toward Ling Han, and his power condensed, transforming into a large dark green hand that enveloped Ling Han. "Big stone, Nyo is going to beat you up." Hunyo was the first to fly off the handle, leaping up from Ling Han's back. Her small fist was wrapped in a silver light, and greeted that large dark blue hand. "Junior sister," Zhang Kailuan exclaimed, hurriedly withdrawing the large hand. He was worried that he would accidentally injure Hu Niu. In this way, the attack dissipated on its own. "Big stone, hurry and get lost, Niu hates you." Hu Niu waved her hand, looking like she was shooing away a fly. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 28:10. Ling Han didn't want to leave. If he didn't give up when their strength was about the same, it would be too embarrassing. However, Zhang Kailuan's challenge was too annoying, and it made Ling Han seriously consider this problem. He swore that when he took the second step, he would definitely beat this guy up. Fiery Frost Plain, a certain mountain. Zhuang Fairway stood with his hands behind his back at the top of the mountain. He didn't make any movements, but there were streams of energy surging into his body. This wasn't spirit energy, but the intrinsic power of the origin world. At his level, even if he didn't deliberately cultivate, his body would instinctively circulate, and he would be in a state of cultivation to improve his realm. He was like a god in the world, making people want to worship him. Lord, a 9th-level immortal king came to the top of the mountain. Zhang Kailuan has been continuously challenging in Ling City for more than 30,000 years. Zhuang Fairway nodded. He looked into the distance and murmured, "If Ling Han still has a trump card, he should have used it on Zhang Kailuan. But he hasn't used it. Does that mean that he has already used it?" That 9th-level immortal king stood respectfully with his hands by his side. He was like a Taoist child, and he didn't have the domineering aura of a 9th-level immortal king. He didn't dare to say anything. Zhuang Fairway let out a long breath. He gathered boundless spirit energy and transformed it into a long dragon that circled around him. Then it soared into the sky. This was a true dragon at the immortal king level. He could create a true dragon just by exhaling. His means were really unimaginable. "Come, I need to take a walk," Zhuang Fairway said lightly, his eyes flashing with killing intent. As for Ling Han, he had too much hatred for him. Numinous Treasure Sea. "Grandpa, that Zhang Kailuan has already stayed in Ling City for over 30,000 years. Come, Ling Han really doesn't have any trump cards left." Two people were standing on top of a gigantic tortoise that was several tens of thousands of meters long. They both looked very young. The one who spoke was a purple-clothed young man. He looked cultured and refined, but the aura he emitted was extremely shocking. He was a first-step heavenly venerable. The other person was dressed in green, and he seemed to be about the same age as the purple-clothed young man. However, his eyes were deep and exuded the aura of the vicissitudes of time. They were incomparably deep and ancient. This was a pair of grandfather and grandson. The grandfather's title was Sheng Yuan, and he was a 4th-step heavenly venerate. The grandson's name was Jiang Feiguang, and he hadn't been a heavenly venerate for long, so he didn't have a title yet. Heavenly Venerate Xingyuan nodded. "This child has a heavenly venerate symbol on him, and it's one of the 7 legendary symbols. It's exceptionally precious, and there will definitely be many people eyeing him. This heavenly venerate will personally make a move. This heavenly venerate is determined to obtain this treasure." Jiang Feiguang revealed a look of envy. He also wanted a heavenly venerate symbol other than the 7 legendary symbols. However, how could he dare to compete with his grandfather? He could only secretly drool. "Go back," Xingyuan Tianyuan said softly, and the giant tortoise below immediately turned around. With a swipe of its 4 legs, it traversed tens of thousands of li. Empyrean 95 appeared in a mountain valley. It was a land of ice and snow. Even a 9th firmament immortal monarch would instantly freeze into an icicle upon entering. This was because this was not a natural cold. Instead, it came from a 3rd-step Empyrean. Feng Qing sat cross-legged. Ice and snow swirled around him, forming symbol after symbol. However, every symbol was extremely blurry and difficult to identify. Empyrean 95's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw this. Feng Qing was creating a heavenly venerate symbol. Although he was still far from success, he had already surpassed 99% of heavenly venerates by taking this step. Empyrean 95 could not help but feel jealous. Although he had also taken 3 steps, he could forget about forming a heavenly venerate symbol. The heavenly venerate symbol that one controlled would not only affect their combat strength, but it would also cause a huge difference in their cultivation speed. It was possible for it to be 10 times, 20 times, or even more. Empyrean 95 became even more excited when he thought of this. How about we look for that kid Ling Han and snatch his heavenly venerate symbol, he said. Feng Qing sat quietly. After a while, the surrounding symbols suddenly disappeared, and he suddenly opened his eyes. It's said that Kid has the combat strength of a third-step Empyrean. Even if we attack him, we might not be able to succeed. If we work together, we have at least a 50% chance of success, said Empyrean 95. Furthermore, if we don't kill this brat as soon as possible, will we still be his match when he reaches the second or third step? Don't forget what we did to him in the immortal region. Feng Qing could not help but sigh. Previously, Imperial Void had already begged him to act, but when he heard that Ling Han had become a cripple, he did not act. But now, he had clearly fallen for Ling Han's evil trick. Feng Qing had never been crippled, but he had used this method to make many powerhouses disdain to act against him. In the end, he had successfully become a heavenly venerate, and a one-step Empyrean could rival a three-step Empyrean. That despicable brat must die, Feng Qing said coldly. Not to mention anything else, his most outstanding disciple had died at Ling Han's hands. How could he not take revenge? Then Daoist Feng Qing has agreed to work together with me? Empyrean 95 was delighted. Feng Qing shook his head. I have no confidence in taking action now. I need to cultivate in seclusion. Once I succeed, I will naturally go and find that kid. His talent was outstanding, and he was not far from cultivating the heavenly venerate symbol. He naturally could not give up at this time. Empyrean 95 tried to persuade him for a while more, but Empyrean Feng Qing ordered him to leave. He had no choice but to leave. He arrived at the entrance of the valley and looked up at the sky. Among the 4 heavenly venerates who had come here, he had the lowest achievement. Wu Lu was the most aggressive, and it was said that he was about to take the 4th step. Qing Hu was not much inferior. Originally, Feng Qing was about the same as him, but now he was about to cultivate the heavenly venerate symbol, and it was very likely that he would catch up. Empyrean 95 felt the difference in his heart. As a heavenly venerate, how could he be willing to bow his head to fate? No, I must obtain that heavenly venerate symbol, he said through gritted teeth. Ling Han could clearly feel that the atmosphere in Ling City was a little tense recently. Although only Zhang Kailuan had been challenging him, every time the two of them fought, there would be streaks of divine will sweeping over and locking onto him. He sighed. Zhang Kailuan was really a jinx. Originally, he had killed He Lakun with the token that Chu Hao had given him, and that had deterred a large number of ambitious people. But after Zhang Kailuan's disturbance, the deterrence had fallen to the bottom. Many people should have already guessed that he actually had no more trump cards, but no one wanted to make a gift for others. Therefore, none of them jumped out and were still observing. But this situation should not last for long. Soon the first person would jump out, and then the second, and the third would be swallowed up. The temptation of the heavenly venerate symbol was something that even a 6th-step heavenly venerate would find hard to resist. It was time to leave. Ling Han had originally planned to do so, but he had been hesitating. But the current situation helped him make up his mind. He had originally wanted to bring his daughter along, but Ling Shi could erupt with the battle prowess of a quasi-heavenly venerate, and no one in the martial arts academy knew her identity. If he went there rashly, her identity would be exposed. Forget it, he would just let them leave. Chapter 28:11. Ling Han began to make preparations, and put the people of Ling City into the celestial visitor residence one by one. After going through thick and thin together, Ling Han was full of trust in the people who stayed behind. Of course, he couldn't abandon them. Now that he had a lot of immortal metal on hand, he could completely create even more celestial visitor residences. He even had a feeling that when the plane power in his body grew to a certain degree, he would be able to produce spirit medicines and immortal metal. Of course, he was still far from this step. Perhaps he would have to wait until he reached the 7th step. Ling Han had other goals for leaving this time. He wanted to obtain at least 2 pieces of devouring metal. Immortal metal wasn't worth much to him now, but if he wanted to forge an Empyrean treasure, only devouring metal could do it. Although the fiery frost plane was large, there were many Empyreans, and devouring metal was too difficult to obtain. Therefore, there should be some gains if he went to other planes to search. After putting everyone into the spatial immortal artifact, Ling Han heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't care who came running over now. As long as he could travel between planes, could even a 7-step Empyrean stop him? Ling Han didn't know because he hadn't seen a 7-step Empyrean. He didn't know what kind of level a 7-step Empyrean could reach. Ling Han! Zhang Kailuan was here to challenge again. Ling Han leaped out of the city. He wanted to have a final battle with Zhang Kailuan, and then he would leave. The origin world was so big that he could roam freely. Leave this battle to this Empyrean. A faint voice sounded, and a young man in green suddenly appeared. Zhang Kailuan's eyes couldn't help but narrow slightly. Lord Xingyuan. This was a 4-step Empyrean. Was he also going to challenge Ling Han? Heavenly Venerate Xingyuan looked at Ling Han. Are you going to hand over the Empyrean symbol yourself? Or do you want this Empyrean to refine it? The Empyrean symbol could only be transmitted, not taught. This was equivalent to cutting off a portion of one's spiritual sea and using it to carry the Empyrean symbol. Naturally, it could only be used once. Once it was cut off, it would be gone. Moreover, it would cause massive damage to one's body. Unless one was an extreme powerhouse, it was impossible for them to do this. For example, Zhou Heng could give his celestial venerate symbol to the black donkey, because he had already reached the 6th step. His spiritual sea was vast, so he could afford to lose out. However, Ling Han was only at the 1st step, so he definitely could not afford to lose out. However, refining it was even more cruel, and one's life would be forfeit. Ling Han smiled faintly. I know you. I don't think so. Heavenly Venerate Xingyuan smiled and shook his head. Have I offended you? Ling Han asked again. Heavenly Sovereign Xingyuan shook his head again. We've never met before. Did I kill your son, grandson, grandchild? Ling Han asked 3 times. Heavenly Sovereign Xingyuan's temper seemed to be astonishingly good, but he still shook his head. No. Then why did you come to my house and openly ask me for my celestial venerate symbol? I owe you. Ling Han suddenly exploded. You've been living like a dog for so many years. The smile on Heavenly Sovereign Xingyuan's face instantly froze. He had been observing Ling Han all this time, and from his expression, he had deduced that Ling Han no longer had any trump cards. He had never expected that Ling Han would suddenly explode and directly curse at him. This brat. He stared menacingly at Ling Han, his killing intent already rising. Brother Xingyuan, why don't you leave this battle to me? Zhuang Fairway appeared with a long laugh. He had a proud expression on his face, and although he called Heavenly Sovereign Xingyuan brother, he did not show any respect. Although he had just reached the 4th step, his cultivation at this step was too powerful. His battle strength was already at the peak of the 4th step, and he did not fear Heavenly Sovereign Xingyuan at all. Zhang Kailuan was shocked again. Of course he recognized Zhuang Fairway. Back then, they could barely be considered to be from the same generation. Didn't this fellow die a long time ago? Why did he suddenly appear, and even advance to the 4th step? Hehe, I also want to join in the fun. Another expert appeared, and he was also at the 4th step. I also don't want to be left out. A 4th Heavenly Venerate appeared, and he was also at the 4th step. More and more Heavenly Venerates appeared. Originally, they had only been observing in the surroundings, but now they all appeared. It couldn't be helped. If they were a step slower, Ling Han would be captured and refined into a celestial venerate symbol. If that happened, it would be too difficult to snatch a celestial venerate symbol from an expert of the same level. Apart from a super monster like Zhuang Fairway, most Heavenly Venerates' battle strength was about the same among those of the same level. The only difference was who obtained more celestial venerate symbols and was stronger. Zhang Kailuan gritted his teeth. What was going on? Not only were there 4th step Heavenly Venerates, but there were also many 3rd step Heavenly Venerates. However, They didn't have the qualifications to come close. They were all waiting for an opportunity from afar. What if Ling Han was seriously injured and sent flying to their side? Ling Han arrived at the 9th Heavenly Venerate, and a murderous look flashed in his eyes. However, it was too difficult to kill his way out of the encirclement of 4th step Heavenly Venerates, and then kill a 3rd step Heavenly Venerate. Unless he advanced to the 2nd step. Forget it. There was no need to rush to kill. Ling Han looked at the 4th step Heavenly Venerates around him. He couldn't even handle one, let alone a dozen. However, he was confident and naturally didn't panic. He said, "So many of you 4th step Heavenly Venerates are bullying me. You're really proud." These words were full of sarcasm, and it made those 4th step Heavenly Venerates look embarrassed. One had to know that Ling Han was only a 1st step Heavenly Venerate. Even one of them was too much, let alone so many 4th step Heavenly Venerates. They couldn't refute these words. What's the point of talking nonsense with a junior? Capture him first, a 4th step Heavenly Venerate said. Ling Han walked towards him, nodded and said, "I'll remember you. I'll definitely pay you a visit in the future." That 4th step Heavenly Venerate's face darkened. Ling Han actually dared to threaten him. Did he think he could still escape this time? "I'm Bai Yin. You might as well remember me," he said calmly. "Capture him first." All the Heavenly Venerates came to a consensus. After capturing him, they would decide who could obtain this Heavenly Venerate symbol through martial arts. Otherwise, what was the point of them fighting to the death? Okay. The others agreed. Zhang Kailuan retreated into the distance. This kind of battle was no longer something he could intervene in. A thought flashed in his mind, and he immediately flew towards the city. Ling Han was already done for, and he wanted to take Hunyo back to the sect. Junior sister. Junior sister. He entered the city, but immediately discovered that there was not the slightest bit of human activity in the city. It was completely empty, without a single person. This was an empty city. Zhang Kailuan immediately flew out of the city and shouted, "Ling Han, where did you hide my junior sister?" Previously, Ling Han had used some tricks to deceive the heavens and the earth, making people think that this city was still the same as before. All the Heavenly Venerates' expressions changed. They were all wily old foxes, and immediately thought of many things. Quickly capture this brat. They moved at the first instant, not giving Ling Han any chance to play any tricks. Ling Han cracked a smile. "Everyone, I've remembered your voices and smiles. I hope you all live a long life. And before I come to find you all, live well." Xiao, his figure flashed and directly disappeared. Where did he go? All the Heavenly Venerates were greatly surprised, because they had already sealed off the surrounding space, so it was impossible for Ling Han to have teleported away. But where did he go? Chapter 28:12. These Heavenly Venerables couldn't stop Ling Han, because Ling Han didn't teleport away. He was shuttling through planes. Who knew how many times higher this level was? This kid is shuttling through planes. Some Heavenly Venerables immediately reacted. Chase! As long as one was a 3rd step Heavenly Venerables, they had the qualifications to shuttle through planes, let alone these 4th step Heavenly Venerables. They tore through space and entered the void. However, the void was the other side of the Yuan world. It was full of chaos and endless darkness. Even if a 4th step Heavenly Venerables entered here, they would be in complete darkness and fall into chaos. Here, no one could go far. They would be lost in eternity, unless, of course, there were plane coordinates to guide them, like a lighthouse. However, why did Ling Han disappear? It was impossible to walk in a straight line in such darkness. One would wander around in a small space like a ghost walking on a wall. Logically speaking, everyone was like this, and Ling Han was no exception. But where did he go? Unless he has plane coordinates, someone suddenly said. All the Heavenly Venerables fell silent. This should be the only reasonable explanation. However, they still had doubts. Even if he had plane coordinates, how could Ling Han disappear so quickly? This was naturally because Ling Han had countless planes power in his body. He was like a small Yuan world, and his speed of shuttling through planes was astonishing. Even a 7th step Heavenly Venerate would be dumbfounded. Ling Han shuttled through space. He planned to come out from a high-level plane. This plane's level was high, and the chances of finding the devoured metal would be much higher. About a year later, Ling Han was about to come out from a high-level plane when he suddenly felt an intense palpitation. Danger, incomparably dangerous. Without hesitation, he tore through space and left the void. His figure tumbled out. He didn't know where he was, but he was surrounded by a sea of fire. The flames were monstrous, burning so much that Ling Han felt some pain. However, this wasn't the biggest danger. He saw a black whip coming from the void. It wasn't a black whip, but a frenzied tentacle. Ling Han was shocked, and all the hair on his body stood on end. He wasn't a seventh-step Empyrean who could fight against frenzy. Even a seventh-step Empyrean would have to join forces to fight against frenzy. Moreover, they would have to borrow the power of the Frostfire plane. How could a first-step Empyrean resist? He hurriedly waved his hand. Shwa, the void was instantly flattened. Pung. Even so, Ling Han still felt space tremble, and a ripple swept past. His face couldn't help but turn pale, and he felt so uncomfortable that he wanted to vomit blood. Frenzy was too strong. Even though they were separated by space, it still made him, who had the strength of a third step, want to vomit blood. It was really terrifying. Ling Han sucked in a breath of cold air. Back then, madness had followed the lighthouse of the immortal domain to find it. Fortunately, Zhou Heng had been there at that time. Otherwise, if madness's tentacles had entered, the damage would have been incomparably terrifying. The void was the domain of chaos. Ling Han could freely travel between planes, because he had the infinite power of the plane in his body. He could go to any plane he wanted. Frenzy didn't have such great ability, but it was a plane in itself. It would never get lost in the void. At most, it would not be able to find the exit. So traveling between planes was also a dangerous thing, because frenzy, the most terrifying existence in the world, resided there. Ling Han sat in the sea of fire. After taking a few breaths, he began to observe his surroundings. Where was this? He strode forward and walked out of the sea of fire. This had taken him more than a year. There was only a sea of fire here, and there was nothing else. Even a second-step Empyrean would have a hard time coming here. This could be considered a dangerous place. What was burning was not the rules, but the power of the plane, exploding in the form of energy like fire. Whether it was fire, ice, lightning, or other rules, they were all forms of energy. This was what Wally had always emphasized. Only then did Ling Han walk into the high-level plane he wanted to go. This was called the Extreme Fire Plane. Among the high-level planes, it was ranked 19th, and was still very close to the front. He had the women come out, and then went on a sightseeing tour while searching for devouring gold metal. Why did he choose this plane? Because this plane had the least number of Empyreans among the high-level planes. So the probability that there might be devouring gold metal was higher than other planes. Everyone continued to search and cultivate. This was a high-level plane, after all, and the spiritual chi was abundant. Year after year, they continued to search. After about 70,000 years, they finally found a piece of devouring gold metal. But Ling Han was not satisfied. Now aside from the Empress, there was still Hunyeo. As for the large black dog, the Rain Emperor, and the others, Ling Han didn't have to worry about them. After all, he couldn't deal with everything himself. He took out a large amount of godly metal, and fed it to the devouring gold metal to swallow. With his current wealth, making the devouring gold metal advance was a piece of cake. In just a few thousand years, this treasured sword forged from devouring gold metal had successfully become a heavenly venerable treasure. This sword was given to the Empress, but Hunyeo couldn't fight for it. Who asked the Empress to bring out her precious daughter? Hunyeo was so intimidated that she lost her temper, and could only ask Ling Han to work harder, so that she could quickly give birth to a big fat son. But they searched here for another 70,000 years, and still didn't find anything. Thus they went to the next plane. This time, Ling Han didn't directly pass through the plane. He decided that as long as he didn't have to, he would obediently follow the passage between the two realms. After spending more than 600,000 years in this plane, they finally found another piece of devouring gold metal. Hunyeo happily took it and nurtured it herself. Previously, they all had a clear goal, but now that they had found 2 sovereign treasure tools, they suddenly became idle. What do we do now? The girls all looked at Ling Han. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, "Return to the fiery frost plain. After being away for so long, I don't know what changes have happened there. Moreover, if we want to obtain more heavenly venerable symbols, we have to return there." The girls all nodded. They knew that Ling Han could pass through space and didn't have to worry about being attacked by elites. Ling Han arranged for his parents and the others to live on this plane. When his problems in the fiery frost plain were resolved, he would bring them back. After another few thousand years, Ling Han and the girls walked through one plane after another and returned to the fiery frost plain. Ling Han was very low-key. Now that there was no threat of frenzy, the various heavenly venerables entered the rhythm of internal strife. It couldn't be helped. Heavenly venerables also had selfish motives. Some wanted to fight over cultivation resources for their descendants, while others fought over heavenly venerable symbols. Originally, the frenzy was a pressure that forced the great heavenly venerables to unite. But now that this pressure was gone, the hearts of the people naturally dispersed. Ling Han first went to the #1 martial arts academy in the world. He hadn't seen his daughter for a long time, and he missed her very much. However, when he arrived at the martial arts academy, he found that there was no one there. Ling Shi had gone out to train. Isn't this little Han? Behind him, the large black dog's voice rang out. Chapter 28:14. Go! They walked towards that chasm. Ling Han and the Empress both changed their appearances and auras slightly. Right now, Ling Han was too big of a target, and as long as it was the Empress, she would also be able to guess Ling Han's identity. Therefore, he could only change his appearance and aura to avoid unnecessary trouble. Why is everyone here? Isn't it just a celestial lord symbol? Ling Han has one on him. The group of people entered the chasm and circulated their immense power to form a barrier to resist the harsh environment. The environment here was really terrible. On one side there were surging flames, and on the other side, there was bone-chilling cold. 2 completely opposite forces were acting on the body at the same time. It was an indescribable torment, and he had to stimulate his own strength to resist. Otherwise, half of his body would be burnt to ashes, while the other half would be frozen into ice. Only an Empyrean could resist the power of an Empyrean. Fortunately, everyone wasn't weak, and it wasn't difficult for them to deal with such pressure. However, if they were to fight here, not many first-step heavenly sovereigns would be able to unleash more than 50% of their battle strength. The trench was huge and deep. Everyone fell for about an hour before they finally reached the surface. Only after arriving here did the extremely harsh environment finally take a turn for the better. However, a vast aura was still circulating endlessly, causing people to involuntarily feel a sense of awe. The aura of that celestial sovereign? Over 100 epochs have passed, but their auras still exist. A 5th-step Empyrean is truly extraordinary. Everyone sighed with sorrow. They still didn't know where this heavenly sovereign was buried, but the boundless aura was already surging like a sea, making everyone sigh in admiration. This could barely be considered a plane, but it was not very flat. There were many sharp stone pillars protruding from the ground. Although they were not densely packed, they were dark and gave people an uncomfortable feeling. How do we go? Everyone was at a loss. This was a plane, and they could go in any direction, but where was the right place to go? Then do as you please, Ling Han said. Exploring the tomb of the ancient heavenly venerate? But when everyone thought about it, they didn't have any clues. What else could they do but walk around casually? Let's just find a random place. Ling Han found a direction based on his intuition, and everyone headed in that direction. Father, I heard that you gave me a younger sister. Ling Jianshui came up to him. All these years, he had been training in the #1 martial arts academy and teaching students. He had not returned to Ling City even once. He did not know how many times Helian Sun Shui had complained about his disobedient son, saying that he did not want his mother after having a wife. Therefore, he hadn't met Ling Shi yet. Ling Han nodded. Much more handsome than you. Ling Jianshui's face couldn't help but turn black. Your precious daughter is precious. Why do you have to compare yourself? What did he provoke? Dad, it's just that I haven't been back for a few years. Do you have to be like this? Ling Han laughed out loud and transmitted his voice with his divine sense. Your sister is called Ling Shi. She is currently in the martial courtyard. What? Ling Jianxue was taken aback. Ling Shi is my sister. He knew Ling Shi. She was too famous. Not only was she the #1 beauty in the martial arts institution, but her talent in martial art was also unbelievably strong. It was said that someone had designs on Ling Shi and wanted to forcefully capture her when she was out training. But the result? A 6th heaven celestial king made a move, but he was beaten like a dog by a 3rd heaven celestial king. He was escorted back to the martial arts institution and honestly confessed the problem, willing to accept his punishment. Everyone guessed that there must be a powerful celestial venerable behind Ling Shi. Otherwise, how could she defeat a 6th heaven with her 3rd heaven cultivation? Now that he knew that Ling Shi was his sister, Ling Jianxue naturally understood that the celestial venerable behind her was actually his father. Father, you are really biased, he said jealously. Ling Han laughed. Your sister is just a girl. How can an uncouth man like you compare to her? When he had the ability to move a small world here, Ling Jianxue had already become a celestial venerable, so there was no need to trouble him at all. Ling Jianxue naturally knew this, so he just said it casually. The father and son talked, and soon, a huge mountain appeared in front of them. This mountain was also strange, as it was round and looked like an upside-down bowl. Upon closer inspection, it was not a mountain but a large tomb. There were purplish gold patterns on the body of the tomb, and from time to time, there was an inexplicable rhythm. We found the right place just by walking around. Everyone was surprised. Their luck was too good, right? Let's see if there is a place we can enter. Ling Han stared at the patterns on the large tomb in a daze. He only felt that there was a surge of power in his body, giving him infinite enlightenment. The 8th talisman was stirring, and it actually showed signs of slowly recovering. Ling Han! Everyone walked towards him. Ling Han nodded. You guys go ahead and look. If you can enter, then don't wait for me. I suddenly had an epiphany, and I want to stay here for a while. Everyone was puzzled, but since Ling Han said so, they naturally would not force Ling Han to leave. Then be careful, everyone said. You guys be careful too. Ling Han also said. Now was not the time to join forces against madness. Everyone was thinking about their own little plans. Everyone nodded and left. Ling Han sat cross-legged and stared at the large tomb, endless enlightenment rising in his heart. The 8th talisman was indeed showing signs of recovery, sparkling with endless mystery. Time passed quietly, and the 8th talisman slowly recovered. The speed was not fast, but Ling Han could accept it. He felt that his will was resonating with the large tomb, which was why he could gain enlightenment and even repair the celestial symbol. However, this was also because Ling Han had been studying the 8th talisman all these years and had spent a great deal of time on it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have comprehended Tao in a single day and succeeded naturally when the conditions were right. He smiled. As the level of resonance grew deeper, so did his comprehension. The 8th talisman's recovery also grew faster and faster. Half a year later, Ling Han suddenly let out a long laugh. The 8th talisman was completely formed. He tried to use the 8th talisman to activate the unique power of the Frostfire plane, to see how much this talisman could increase his cultivation speed. The results shocked him. 27 times. It had to be known that the 9th talisman, which had been nurtured by countless third-step celestial venerables, could only increase the efficiency by 15 times. It had almost doubled. Ling Han was shocked. This was too awesome. This was not only an increase in cultivation, but also in combat power. With the support of the 8th talisman, his combat power would also increase by an astonishing amount. Indeed, what belonged to him was the strongest. Why was the 8th talisman so strong? Because it was nurtured by Ling Han himself. It was the most suitable for him. Even if he dug it out and let Ling Jianxue inherit it, It should be considered good for Ling Jianshui to be able to display a dozen times the efficiency. Ling Han was very satisfied. This time, he had really come to the right place. Even if there were no other gains, this alone was completely worth it. What are you laughing at? You're so noisy. A voice sounded behind Ling Han. Chapter 28:15. Ling Han looked back and saw a total of 7 people behind him. Ling Han's gaze was fixed on one of them, and an expression of disbelief appeared on his face. That was because this person should definitely not be alive. Primordial Desolation. He remembered that he had gone berserk in the Immortal Domain's 2-realm battlefield and killed Primordial Desolation. After killing Primordial Desolation, Ling Han entered the foreign realm and began another adventure. How did the dead come back to life? Could it be that they looked alike? This wasn't impossible because the world was so big, and there were so many living beings. It wasn't strange for people to look alike. However, this person was only a 9th firmament immortal king. How could he come here? There were only 2 possibilities. One was that he had a treasure on him that could protect him until he came here. The other was that an expert was looking after him. Ling Han's curiosity was piqued as he stared at the person who looked like Primordial Desolation. "Hey, I'm talking to you!" A Celestial Venerable shouted at Ling Han. He was very young and hadn't been in Celestial Venerable for long. He lacked the necessary stability and arrogance of a young man. Ling Han glanced at him. "Oh, what do you want to say?" "It's nothing much. It's just that we were walking along just fine. But you suddenly screamed and gave us a fright. So how do you plan on compensating us?" Another Celestial Venerable said. He wasn't as pompous as the first Celestial Venerable, but he couldn't hide his arrogance. He was a 2nd-step Celestial Venerable, and had cultivated for countless years, more than the first Celestial Venerable. However, the pride of a Celestial Venerable couldn't hide his sense of superiority. Ling Han laughed. "Then how do you want me to compensate you?" "Sing us a song and dance," the first Celestial Venerable said with a smile. He turned to look at the others, but many of them smiled and nodded. Celestial Venerables couldn't be humiliated. That was immortal to a Celestial Venerable. But when it came to Celestial Venerables, it depended on who was stronger. The strong could do whatever they wanted. This was the truth of the world. Haha, I haven't seen a Celestial Venerable sing or dance. This idea isn't bad. The 2nd-step Celestial Venerable clapped and laughed. "Little Gold, your idea isn't bad." The first Empyrean was immensely pleased with himself, as if he had done something remarkable. Of the 7 people, only one Empyrean had a cold expression. He was arrogant to the extreme, as if there was nothing in this world that could move him. However, he did have the right to be arrogant, because he was the only 3rd step out of the 7 people. "Hey, aren't you going to start singing?" Celestial Xiaojin shouted at Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head. Did he really have a troublesome aura? This time, he really had no intention of provoking anyone. "Which family are you from? Didn't your parents teach you not to make trouble for yourself?" Ling Han walked over to Xiaojin, his face full of disdain. Xiaojin couldn't help but become angry. Everyone was in the same generation, yet you actually dared to reprimand me in such an arrogant manner. Who do you think you are? How dare you? He scolded, reaching out to grab Ling Han. They were in the same generation, so he naturally didn't fear Ling Han. Ling Han casually patted, and Xiao Jin's attack was neutralized. He didn't even look at him. He stared at the only 9th heaven immortal king and said, "You look somewhat familiar. Tell me, what's your name?" Damn it! Xiao Jin flew into a rage. Ling Han actually dared to look down on him. He roared like a tiger, and was about to attack again. Ling Han's gaze sharpened, and he glared at Xiao Jin. "Don't be so shameless. You're courting death." Xiao Jin felt a chill run down his spine, and all the energy in his body dissipated. He felt his bones go soft, and he wanted to sit on the ground. Ling Han smiled at the 9th heaven immortal king and said, "What? Don't you know how to speak? Sir, you're too arrogant." A 2nd step Empyrean said. The strength of their group was extremely powerful. 1 was at the 3rd step, 3 were at the 2nd step, and 2 were at the 1st step. That 9th heaven immortal king could be ignored since he was just a bystander. However, 6 Empyreans weren't powerful enough. Ling Han was only at the first step. Ling Han shook his head. Why do people always have to interrupt me? This Empyrean is Lu Xianting's second step. The second step Empyrean said in a low voice. He reported his cultivation to intimidate Ling Han. A mere first step Empyrean was nothing in front of a second step Empyrean. Things were different now. All the Empyreans had to be united. Instead, they had formed various interest groups, and everyone worked for themselves. It was true that more than half of the Empyreans had returned to their planes, and only 10 to 20% remained. However, how many Empyreans had been here in the past? Even 10 to 20% was a shocking number. Ling Han said, "So what if you're at the second step? Are you that amazing?" The corner of Lu Xuanting's mouth twitched. Was this person stupid? Of course a second step was amazing. They could easily crush you. How could you still be so arrogant? You really are arrogant. Lu Xianting said coldly. Originally, they had only wanted to make fun of Ling Han, and hadn't wanted to take Ling Han's life. However, Ling Han's arrogance had made him want to kill him. So what if he killed him? This wasn't a time of war. Ling Han nodded. I'm not targeting you, but I've always treated trash like this. Lu Xianting wasn't the only one who became even angrier. Even the third step Empyrean, who had maintained a disdainful expression, raised his eyebrows and glared at Ling Han. He was really courting death. Since you're tired of living, then this Empyrean will help you. Lu Xianting attacked, pressing down on Ling Han. He didn't want to offend Ling Han, so he sent a punch straight at Ling Han's face. If he didn't even have this much confidence, then he would be an Empyrean in vain. Ling Han didn't move. Only when the punch was about to land, did he suddenly kick out. Pung! Lu Xianting was sent flying, instantly turning into a small black dot. Ugh! The remaining 6 people all opened their mouths wide, revealing expressions of complete disbelief. What was going on? A third step Empyrean had actually been sent flying with 1 kick, and 1 step? Was there still justice in this world? They were all shocked. If even Lu Xianting wasn't a match for Ling Han, then the other 2 second step Empyreans would have suffered the same result. The third step Empyrean finally looked straight at Ling Han and said, I underestimated you. So you're actually so strong. No wonder you're so arrogant. Ling Han smiled. It's just SOSO. It's not a problem for me to beat trash. The other 6 all revealed angry expressions. Damn, they'd been called trash again. However, Ling Han hadn't mentioned names. If they insisted on going up, wouldn't they be asking for a scolding? This Empyrean is Ping Xinghai, the third step Empyrean said proudly. However, he had just opened his mouth when Ling Han stretched out a hand, indicating for him to shut up, causing him to stop abruptly. What are you afraid? Ping Xinghai revealed a proud expression, but Ling Han had already turned to the 9th Heaven Empyrean and asked, You still haven't answered me. What's your name again? Instantly, the proud expression on Ping Xinghai's face seemed to freeze, and he became extremely embarrassed. The other party didn't take him seriously at all. The 9th Heaven Empyrean first glanced at Ping Xinghai, then smiled and said, I am Primeval Desolation. Chapter 28:16. Primordial Desolation was also called Primordial Desolation. Ling Han knew that there were many people in the world who looked alike, but it was almost impossible to have the same name. Primordial Desolation from the Immortal Region? Primordial Desolation's eyelids twitched. You're also from the Immortal Region? He wasn't some famous person, and the reason he could hang out with Lu Xianting and the others was because of Heavenly Sovereign Feng Qing's reputation and his eloquence. Ling Han shook his head. You really are a bad person. You've lived for 1,000 years. I remember I've already killed you. You're Ling Han. Primordial Desolation couldn't help but cry out in shock, and then a look of intense anger appeared on his face. The person he hated the most in his life was definitely Ling Han, who had personally killed him. If Feng Qing hadn't defied the heavens and saved him, his grave would have been covered in grass. Although he had survived, his foundation had been severely damaged. Thus, the 9th level of Immortal King was his limit. Even in the Frost Plane, He had no hope of becoming a heavenly sovereign. This time, he had shamelessly asked someone to bring him here in order to defy the heavens and change his fate. He hoped to restore his foundation and rise again. This was a glorious world, and he was infatuated with it. He hoped he could command the winds and clouds here. He should have recognized Ling Han immediately, but Ling Han had changed his appearance and aura. How could a 9th-level immortal king like him see through him? Ling Han? Ping Xinghai's eyelids twitched. Of course he had heard of Ling Han. Back in the day, he had been a famous person in the foreign battlefield. He had created a legend in the 1st and 2nd levels. However, this was not the era of the foreign battlefield. I heard that you obtained a heavenly sovereign symbol in the 2nd level, he asked. His tone was extremely calm, but it was unable to conceal the traces of excitement within it. Apart from the 7 legendary symbols, any heavenly sovereign symbol was incomparably precious. Even a 7th-step heavenly sovereign wouldn't mind having one more. You're greedy, so be it. You're just a hypocrite. Ling Han rebuked him mercilessly. Ping Xinghai was enraged. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Ling Han wave his hand, suppressing his words. Go away first. I don't have time for you right now. Ling Han stared at chaos. It should be Feng Qing who saved you. In a lower realm like the immortal realm, a 1st-step heavenly venerable had the power to defy the heavens and seize fate. Primitive nodded proudly. That's right. He was filled with respect for Feng Qing, almost to the point of blind worship. Of course, those who could become an Empyrean in a lower plane were all astonishingly talented. Ling Han, Ping Xinghai said through gritted teeth. He was infuriated. Ling Han had interrupted him twice, just because he wanted to settle a score with the 9th heaven celestial king. Fuck, a 9th firmament immortal king is nothing compared to him. Ling Han sighed and walked over to him. Don't you have any sense? Can't you see that I'm busy? Are you stupid? Bastard, Ping Xinghai roared. With a tap of his foot he charged at Ling Han. Ka ka ka. With a stomp of his foot, the ground cracked open, revealing thousands of cracks that resembled a spider web. His palms crisscrossed, pressing down on Ling Han. He was truly infuriated. This attack wasn't launched from afar. Rather, it was wrapped around his palms with the power of a 3rd step. His entire body was suffused with the aura of primal chaos. Combined with his fluttering long hair, he looked like a demon god. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless. This was a 3rd step heavenly venerable, and his battle prowess was enough to match his own. He punched out, meeting Ping Xinghai's attack. Boom! Fist and palm collided, sending out endless ripples that spread in all directions. Ping Xinghai looked shocked. He hadn't been able to gain the slightest advantage in this exchange. This 1st step was heaven-defying. Ling Han also looked surprised. You're a 3rd step heavenly venerable, but you have some ability. You can't be considered trash. Fuck. Anyone who heard these words would be furious. A 1st step heavenly venerable actually dared to be so cocky. But with the strength that Ling Han had displayed, would anyone still dare to say that Ling Han was arrogant? Whether he was arrogant or not depended on his strength. This venerable doesn't believe it. Ping Xinghai snorted coldly and attacked again. A blurry symbol lit up in his palm. He activated the heavenly venerable symbol and the heavenly venerable paragon technique, instantly erupting with his full strength. No matter what, he had to suppress Ling Han. Just a heavenly venerable symbol was enough to make him unable to control himself. Ling Han smiled faintly. He activated the heavenly venerable symbol and the 9 transformations heaven scripture, clashing head-on with his opponent. But this way, Ling Han was immediately at a disadvantage. How could he be inferior? Their strength was about the same. The heavenly venerable symbol they used was one of the 7 ancient symbols, which could increase their strength by 4 or 5 times. The key was the heavenly venerable paragon technique. The 9 transformations heaven scripture was created by a 2nd step heavenly venerable. Although it was amazing, it was only limited to the 2nd step. But now they were fighting at the 3rd step level. Ping Xinghai's secret technique had reached the 3rd step level. Thus this gave him the advantage. Haha, this is the foundation, Ping Xinghai said faintly, but couldn't stop his arrogance. He had learned from a 5th step heavenly venerable, and the secret technique he was using now was passed down by that fifth step Heavenly Venerable. Although it wasn't the core secret technique of that fifth step Heavenly Venerable, it was more than enough for him to use now. Ling Han nodded. The 9 Transformations Heaven scripture was created by a second step Heavenly Venerable, but the 5-element thunder technique and indestructible heaven scripture were at a lower level, only first step. As long as battle prowess surpassed second step, these 2 treasured techniques wouldn't be able to keep up and wouldn't achieve the desired effect. Previously, he had only cared about raising his cultivation level. Now, it was time to obtain a treasured technique that matched his battle prowess, or directly create a Heavenly Venerable technique. Hand over the Heavenly Venerable symbol, and I can spare your life, Ping Xinghai said proudly. He was only at the 3rd step, and wanting to refine a Heavenly Venerable and extract the Heavenly Venerable symbol was extremely difficult. Thus, if Ling Han was willing to voluntarily give it up, it would save him a lot of unnecessary trouble. As for whether or not he would spare Ling Han's life, that would depend on his mood at that time. Ling Han smiled slightly. As a person, it's important not to be too arrogant. Don't you want that Heavenly Venerable symbol? Fine, I'll let you experience it. Ling Han activated the 9th talisman, and then once again charged out, charging towards Ping Xinghai. Hong hong hong. The 2 of them clashed once more, and Ping Xinghai's expression changed. That was because Ling Han's battle prowess was actually on par with his. Why? It was very simple. The Heavenly Venerable symbol that Ling Han activated was on a higher level than his own. If one could only increase his power by 5 times, while the other could increase it by 10 times, how could they compare? The 2 of them were evenly matched, but one was stronger in terms of the Heavenly Venerable symbol, while the other was stronger in terms of the Heavenly Venerable technique. Lu Xianting had just returned, and when he saw that Ling Han and Ping Xinghai were evenly matched, he couldn't help being dumbfounded. It wasn't just him. The others were the same. They had never seen such a powerful first step Heavenly Venerable before. Ping Xinghai clenched his teeth. He firmly believed that he would definitely win. The Heavenly Venerable symbol could only last for 2 hours, but the Heavenly Venerable secret art was different. As long as he could exhaust Ling Han's Heavenly Venerable symbol, he would be able to suppress Ling Han in one fell swoop. He would definitely suppress this opponent. Chapter 28:18. Ling Han didn't pursue. He was stronger than Ping Xinghai, but there was a limit. Also, the Celestial Venerable symbol had a time limit. If he couldn't suppress Ping Xinghai in a short time, he would be in a disadvantageous position. Ling Han shook his head. He had no choice. He didn't have a high-level Celestial Venerable technique. It was time for him to improve his Rage Fist to match his strength. Since he had already walked his own path, of course he had to create a corresponding technique. For a moment Ling Han was in a daze. He was thinking about how to fuse the Rage Fist with his special path. He quivered and came back to his senses. Now wasn't the time to think about this. He shook his head and started to walk around the tomb, looking for the entrance. Not long after, he found that the entrance was a stone door. It was 300 feet tall and 700 feet wide. It was very grand. Was this a tomb of the dead or a palace? Ling Han wasn't sure. You said it was dead, so why were you so particular about it? Forget it, it wasn't his tomb anyway. The door had already been pushed open. Ling Han didn't stand on ceremony and walked in. The door was big, and the passage inside was also wide, matching the door. The walls glowed automatically, but his vision couldn't see far. He didn't know what was blocking it. Strange, Ling Han said in his heart. As he walked, he rubbed his hand on the wall to sense the surrounding environment. What surprised him was that his divine will couldn't penetrate this wall. It was like the walls of the extraterritorial battlefield, which had the ability to block the divine sense of a celestial venerable. Although it couldn't compare to the devouring metal, it was very precious. It was the main material for building a celestial venerable level array, and it could even display the power of a celestial venerable. He had an urge to knock the wall down and take it away. This could be used to set up a defense in his Ling city. Ordinary celestial venerables would need some time to attack, and there would be enough buffer time. Forget it. He should go find the celestial venerable symbol first. His own strength was the most important. Ling Han resisted the urge and walked in large strides. However, he had already remembered this place. The passageway was extremely long, and after walking for about 100 li, the path ahead suddenly opened up. An enormous plaza appeared. It was so tall that the top couldn't be seen, because there was something blocking it. He could only feel that it was very, very tall. He wasn't the only one in the plaza. There were many of them, and they were divided into small teams that were scattered around. Looking around, one could tell that everyone here was basically an Empyrean. What are all these people waiting for? Ling Han looked around and quickly located the location of the original born Heavenly Lord and the others. Then he strode over. Did you gain anything? The Empress asked. She and Hunyo naturally understood Ling Han the best, and knew that he had definitely gained some kind of comprehension when he had stayed behind and not left. Ling Han nodded. Very good. He paused for a moment before asking, what's the situation now? The born originality Heavenly Exalt continued. Even though that ancient Heavenly Exalt transformed into the Tao, he left behind an inheritance. Roughly speaking, this place is divided into a total of 4 sections, namely the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird and Black Tortoise Halls. This is the White Tiger Hall. Ling Han gave an "oh." No wonder they could find the right place even if they randomly chose a direction. As it turned out, there were palaces in all 4 directions here. Indeed, no matter where they went, they would find the right place. Then why are we all standing here? He asked. The born Heavenly Lord shook his head and sighed. If you want to enter the palace and obtain the inheritance, you have to pass a test. But the problem is that there are 3 4th-step Heavenly Venerables here, and they have joined forces to seal off the path, not allowing anyone the chance to pass the test. Oh, Ling Han was surprised. These 3 people were really domineering. Could it be that they weren't afraid of incurring the wrath of the masses? Thinking again, how powerful were 4th-step Heavenly Venerables? One of them could rival 103rd-step Heavenly Venerables. And how many 3rd-step Heavenly Venerables were there in total here? Thus, so what if these 3 were domineering? They hadn't cleared the area yet. Then did they not pass the test? Ling Han asked. The born Heavenly Lord shook his head. How could they not? It's just that they did not pass. Ling Han was surprised. Those who could become 4th-step Heavenly Venerables were all mighty and domineering beings. Yet these 3 actually did not pass the test. This was really a little hard to believe. He chuckled and said, then what do they mean? Since they can't obtain it themselves, they won't allow others to try? The born Heavenly Lord sighed and said, who knows what they are thinking? Perhaps they want to summon their own disciples here to try. After all, we should keep the goodies within our own fields. The large black dog interrupted. Ling Han nodded. That's also a possibility. Who cares what possibility it is? The crux of the matter is that these 3 bastards have blocked off the path. And we don't even have the chance to try at all. The large black dog cursed, his expression filled with dissatisfaction. I'll go check the situation. He continued walking forward. And it wasn't long before he arrived at the 3 young people, who were currently sitting in a cross-legged position. However, their youthfulness was only an appearance. All of their eyes were incredibly deep, and they exuded an aura of age and vicissitudes. Not far behind them, there was a palace that was completely silvery white in color. It was like a ferocious tiger that was accumulating power and waiting to strike, and could erupt with a world-shaking strike at any moment. The palace had no windows, and there was only one entrance that could be entered, and that was the main entrance. However, though the main entrance was wide open, it was a door of light that was constantly revolving. Obviously, entering through this door would not lead to entering the palace, but was instead the test that the born Heavenly Lord had mentioned. Because before these 3 Heavenly Venerables had sealed the door, there had already been people who had entered the door of light, but all of them had failed and retreated. Thus, the situation here was known to others. Ling Han observed. Though these 3 4th-step Heavenly Venerables went up indifferently, and they were also sitting very casually, Ling Han was very clear that they had sealed off all the paths to enter the door of light. No matter which path one entered from, they would encounter the combined attacks of these three heavenly venerables. That was a fourth-step cultivator. So which third-step cultivator would have the courage to face their attacks head-on? A fourth-step cultivator suddenly charged towards Ling Han, his eyes incredibly sharp, causing Ling Han's eyes to hurt, and he almost lost his sight. However, this heavenly venerate saw that Ling Han was only one step, and after this one glance, he withdrew his gaze, too lazy to pay him any more attention. Ling Han retreated and channeled the indestructible heaven's scroll. After a long while, the pain in his eyes disappeared. He had to admit that fourth-step cultivators were indeed strong. The reason he could kill He Kun was completely because of the message talisman that Chu Hao had given him. Otherwise, he would only be able to block about 10 moves from the fourth-step cultivators at most. And if the three fourth-step cultivators joined forces, that one move would be enough to kill him. If he took the risk and charged in head-on, the possibility of him directly collapsing was even higher. Thus, Ling Han returned to the Empress's side. Now it's an unsolvable situation, Ling Han said. The Empress and the others all nodded. Though they knew that Ling Han was very powerful and extremely freakish, he was still a first-step cultivator, after all. It was very normal that he couldn't compete with a fourth-step cultivator. Then give up just like this, the large black dog said unwillingly. Or go to the other three palaces, Ling Jianshui suggested. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, You guys go to the other three palaces first, I'll wait here. Wait for what? Ling Han said slowly. As long as another fourth-step heavenly venerate arrives, even if these three people will also join in, there will definitely be a process, and that time will be the key to breaking out of this situation. When had he ever suffered such treatment? Ling Han smiled. The might of a fourth-step Empyrean is indeed terrifying. But Brother Ping is the disciple of a fifth-step Empyrean, and you are also a third-step Empyrean. As long as you raise your voice, with everyone's dissatisfaction, they will definitely unite under Brother Ping's command. At that time, everyone will attack together, and there will definitely be many people who can break through that door. Ping Xinghai hesitated slightly, but he snorted and said, Are you using this venerate as a spear? This guy wasn't stupid. How could someone who could become an Empyrean be stupid? Ling Han naturally wouldn't give up, and he continued, Brother Ping, what you said is wrong. When you encounter injustice, you will strike the table and rise up. People like us who practice martial art, don't we pursue quick revenge? Although those three lords are powerful, they can't do whatever they want. They are powerful, so it's fine that they have entered first. However, they haven't gained anything, yet they still want to stop others. This is going too far. I feel that with Brother Ping's talent and strength, you will definitely be able to pass through the test left behind by the ancient Empyrean. Doing this is completely destroying Brother Ping's opportunity. This is really going too far. These words were reasonable, and coupled with the fact that Ping Xinghai was already very unhappy, he easily resonated with them. He humphed, and although he didn't say anything, he was already moved. Ling Han continued, and he really did flatter Ping Xinghai quite a bit. It was so mushy that even he wanted to vomit. After spending time with the large black dog, Ling Han wasn't only skilled at insulting others, but his ability to flatter others was also not to be underestimated. Every word he said hit Ping Xinghai's sweet spot. It had to be known that Ping Xinghai was currently in a bad situation. His subordinates had been killed, and now he was blocked here. However, although his three subordinates were still obedient, they secretly held a grudge against him. He knew this in his heart, but he had indeed suffered a great loss at the hands of Ling Han, so he had nothing to say. Now that he was being praised by Ling Han again and again, he was naturally feeling extremely pleased. All right, this sovereign will not pass on this responsibility to others. Ping Xinghai nodded his head, appearing extremely heroic. He was naturally persuaded for his own sake. Just as Ling Han had said, he deeply believed that with his talent, he would definitely be able to pass through the test and obtain the teachings of that ancient Empyrean. After being defeated by Ling Han, he now had an incredible desire to obtain a high-level Empyrean symbol. Ping Xinghai was swift and decisive, and he immediately took action, communicating with the various small groups. He was a third-step Empyrean, and with the backing of a fifth-step Empyrean, many people were willing to follow him and fight. Previously, no one had organized them, so they were like a plate of loose sand. Now that they had joined forces, they could not be small. There were many people here who were fourth-step or fifth-step Empyreans, so these fourth-step Empyreans would not dare to kill them. Under Ping Xinghai's lead, they pressed towards the entrance of the palace. "Milords," Ping Xinghai cupped his fists. "We greatly respect the three milords, and I believe that the three milords will understand our desire to enter this place. I hope that the three milords can accommodate us." A fourth-step Empyrean approached Ping Xinghai. "You have been stirring up trouble for 2 days just to force us to abdicate." Ping Xinghai didn't even have time to speak before Ling Han interjected. "You three old bastards, could it be that you don't know who my young master Ping is? He's a third-step Heavenly Venerable tier, and his master is a fifth-step Heavenly Venerable tier. So what if he asks you to make way for him?" Gasp. Ping Xinghai involuntarily sucked in a breath of cold air. How could he say something like that? Even if that was what he was thinking, he could not say it out loud, let alone say it in front of everyone. That would be starting a war. "How dare you?" A fourth-step Empyrean wearing black robes angrily rebuked, releasing a boundless pressure. The other two fourth-steps also had unfriendly expressions, and it seemed like they wanted to attack. Ping Xinghai hurriedly tried to salvage the situation. "Three lords, please don't. Don't be arrogant. We have the advantage in numbers. Why would we be afraid of you?" Ling Han interrupted. "Shit. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.